The draft is loose.
Welcome back to Only Talk Sports, and tonight we have a live stream with Austin Williams talking about the college football tier list for 2023. We're only doing Power 5 teams, so some of your favorite non-Power 5 teams are not going to be here, but we are definitely going to be talking about all of the Power 5 teams. Sorry that we are very late. I know there's some technical difficulties going on, but we are finally live and definitely cannot wait to talk about this. What are your first thoughts, Austin, before we get into this?
I'm happy that I'm back on your channel. It's gonna be a fun time. But my overall first thoughts on this is there's a lot of interesting teams going into 2023. A lot of them we know where they're going, and then there's those sums out there like Colorado, Wisconsin, where there's some interesting things. You know, well, it's one of those things where that's what tonight's all about. We're going to put them in our tier list and see what you guys think, if you agree, disagree. But I can't wait to get it started.
Definitely, for sure. And there's going to be a lot of teams that we're going to have a hard time figuring out where they should go. But our tier list, we have college football playoff contenders, New Year's Six contenders, top 25 teams, bowl teams, almost bowl teams, and then dumpster fires. First team we have on this list is the Arizona Wildcats. Now, this is interesting because of the fact Arizona has been struggling for years in the Pac-12, which we know the Pac-12 is basically disintegrating as we speak. All these teams are moving out of the Pac-12 into other conferences, but for now, they're still a Pac-12 school. Austin, do you feel like Arizona is still a dumpster fire, or do you think that they should be an almost bowl team or somewhere higher than that?
We have to keep things realistic, of course. I feel like Arizona's almost a bowl team. I would put them in the almost bowl team tier. I won't say that they're dumpster fire because Jed Fish has definitely done some great things for them. He's brought them back to somewhat of relevancy. Everyone remembers last year they beat UCLA in dramatic fashion, and that kind of opened everybody's eyes that, hey, Arizona, they're right there again. Like, he's got them right there. So I would put them in almost bowl. What do you think, Jeffrey?
Before I answer that, really do appreciate the super chat from Kyler Savage Sports. Really appreciate that. He says, if Texas doesn't win the Big 12, what happens? Well, I mean, I guess it just means that Texas isn't back. I mean, Texas is really solid. They've got a lot of talent, and I think that they should have a lot of success this season. Me and Austin are definitely going to be talking about Texas coming up very soon. But again, really do appreciate the super chat. Definitely helps the channel. Really, really do appreciate that. And definitely going to be talking about Texas. I think that they should definitely be in the conversation to win the Big 12 for sure. If not, that will be disappointing. But to get back to Arizona, I think that I have to agree with you, Austin. I would say they're a dumpster fire, but they're not as bad as they used to be. A couple years ago, they were definitely a dumpster fire team, but they've gotten better. They're no longer as bad as they were before. They've made some improvements, and I do feel like that they're probably going to fall short of being a bowl team, but I do think that they will be an almost bowl team as well. I have to agree. Now, the next team on the list is Arizona's rival, Arizona State. Now, the Sun Devils, they were really solid years ago. Then when you had Herm Edwards, I mean, they were pretty decent. I mean, they're going like 7-5, 6-6 all the time, sometimes 8 wins. But for a lot of fans, that wasn't enough. I think he was like 25-18 in his tenure when he got fired. I mean, it was decidedly fair. I mean, it wasn't bad. But now, they've got a new head coach, Kenny Dillingham, who has never had coaching experience as a head coach before. He's one of the youngest coaches in college football. They're really a mystery team. We actually really have no idea how they're going to do because, I mean, they weren't as good last year since Jane Daniels, moved on to LSU, and he was really solid for them. But I think that they do have Drew Pine, who was the quarterback for Notre Dame this past season. So Arizona State is, again, a mystery. Where do you think that they should be, Austin?
I think, like you said, they're a mystery, but also they have a lot of things, the NCAA and their investigation, where's that going to fall? Kenny Dillingham, many people have said at Oregon he was a offensive mastermind and he brought Oregon's offense up to speed. But let's be honest. If we're being realistic, I'd say there's still a dumpster fire. I know they did acquire Drew Pine, like you said, but that they still got too much going on. And after the disasters they had with Herm Edwards and everything else, I just think they're still the dumpster fire. That they may win 3 or 4 games, but I don't think they're going to be close to bowl eligibility. I would say put them in dumpster fire.
Now, that makes sense. I mean, for me, I almost want to go almost bowl teams because I think that they're still, even though there was a mass exodus of players from Arizona State, they do not have nowhere near the talent that they had a couple years ago. I still feel like that they have some talent. It's not all bad, especially with Drew Pine. I mean, he's a decent quarterback. He can have some success. But I do think that there are a lot of problems in the program overall. And I don't think there'll be a dumpster fire program for long. But I will have to agree with you. I'll put them here for now as well, just because of the fact that they have so many question marks. And, it's going to take probably a couple years for Kenny Dillingham to get that figured out. So the next team is Arkansas. The Razorbacks, they're a team that's kind of trending in the wrong direction, it seems, because a couple years ago, they were around the top of the world. Everybody was giving Sam Pittman praise. Arkansas was possibly an SEC West, contender, be able to win that side of the division, maybe even have a shot to win the SEC somehow. But obviously Alabama, Georgia, some of those teams are just so good. It's very typical for teams like Arkansas to crack that, top barrier in the SEC. But they seem to, be kind of taking steps in the wrong direction. They weren't as good last year. Obviously, KJ Jefferson missed a couple of games. But do you think that, where do you feel like Arkansas is? I think they're a bowl team, but do you think that they're possibly top 25 team, bowl team? Where do you have the Razorbacks?
So, Arkansas, they've got a lot of talent. They're loaded. But can they put it all together is their big key. Can they put it all together? Can they make it work? Can they mesh well? KJ Jefferson, a lot of people were saying he can finish anywhere from top 10 to top 5 in Heisman voting. It's very interesting. I would say Arkansas is a top 25 team, especially the conference that they play in, and the fact that Sam Pittman always has them winning consistently, and the AP loves them some SEC sometimes a little too much, but they've earned the reputation. I would say put them in top 25 teams. I think they'll still be really good.
Now, Kyler Savage Sports, he says 6-6. Now, I mean, that's, debatable because to your point, Austin, Arkansas hasn't been really solid lately. And, the AP voters definitely love SEC teams. As long as they go 8-4, maybe 8-5, do you think they maybe would be at the back end of the top 25? But to Kyler's point, it's still the SEC West. And there's a lot of good teams in the SEC West. You've got Mississippi State. You've got Ole Miss. We're going to be getting all these teams. But Arkansas is going to play all of them. I'm kind of on the fence because I think they're definitely going to be a bowl team. But, I mean, if they go 7-5, will they be a top 25 team? If they win the bowl game, they'd be 8-5. It's kind of close. I mean, I probably will go with you and say that they'll find a way to be a top 25 team just because of the fact how good of a job Sam Pittman's done. And KJ Jefferson, he did miss a couple games. As long as he's healthy and he's putting up massive stats, you would think that they should find a way to possibly backdoor their way to being a fringe top 25 team. But they're a top 25 team by the skin of their Razorback teeth. Now, on to the next team, we've got the Alabama Crimson Tide. This one's probably not super hard. Granted, Alabama, there's some question marks at quarterback, question marks on some of their positions for the first time in a long time. A lot of people are saying, is Alabama going to fall to 8-4? Are they the Saban dynasty declining and all that kind of stuff? I don't know about that, but there are some question marks about Alabama. But where do you have the Alabama Crimson Tide, Austin? Do you think that they are a top team like with the CFP contenders, or do you think that they have fallen to New Year's Six contenders?
I mean, let's be honest. It's the Alabama Invitational. As the great Shannon Sharp says, it's the Alabama Invitational. That as long as Nick Saban's around, I've come to terms with Alabama's always going to be in the college football playoff discussion. No matter what people want to say, oh, Alabama, they're falling off. Nick Saban has lost his touch. That he ain't never lost his touch. Let's get a grip with reality. Nick Saban is always going to have Alabama in that discussion. I mean, just like last year, they were 10-2 going into the final poll, and they almost made it in. If Ohio State, which we'll get to, would have lost by more to Michigan, it could have been very interesting. But I'll throw Alabama and CFP contender. I think they're still really solid, and I think Nick Saban figures it out.
I'd have to agree. I mean, they, like you said, they were so close. Just a couple points combined between the Tennessee and the LSU game. If TCU had lost more to Kansas State, they could have gotten it as well. If TCU had fallen further, like you said, if Ohio State lost more to Michigan. So, I mean, they were this close. Alabama's still a super talented team. They get a lot of great players every single year, and it's Nick Saban. I mean, yes, there are some quarterback questions, but I think overall that Alabama is definitely still a CFP contender. It's very hard to imagine, even if they did make the CFP, that at least they would not be contending for it. Now, Kyler, Savage Sports says 11-1, lost to Texas. That's very interesting. He's supposed to be very high on the Texas Longhorns. 2 comments for Texas. So definitely he thinks Texas has a good shot to be really good this year. But even then, if Alabama had one loss, they're still a CFP contender. So it seems we are all in consensus. Next, we have Auburn. The Auburn Tigers are a team that since the Gus Malzahn era has ended, they've been bad. I mean, for Auburn standards, they haven't been as bad as some of these other teams on the list. They're still getting talent because it's Auburn and they're in the SEC and they're getting talent, but they've been really struggling as a program. But maybe things are starting to trend back in the right direction. They got a new head coach in Hugh Freeze who's had success. Where do you think that the Auburn Tigers are going to be, Austin, this season? Bowl team, maybe better, maybe worse?
So Hugh Freeze, there's a lot of questions with him for the fact of his off-field stuff, which we don't have to discuss that because that's not what this is about. This is about how good is Auburn going to be. Well, Auburn, they're interesting. Like you said, the Gus Malzahn era, the back half wasn't so great. It was at best. But their schedule, I think, lines up for them really well. I think, their biggest games are LSU, Georgia, and Bama. If they can go 1-2, 2-1, that I would throw them in bowl team. I wouldn't say they're top 25, but I would throw them in bowl team. I think with the way their schedule lines up, I think they can manage to get 6 wins.
I would have to agree. Now, Kyler, he's got 8-4, so definitely a little bold on the Auburn Tigers. I could see it. Again, the talent is there. Auburn always has talent. Peyton Thorne, I think he was just announced as the starting quarterback. And, I mean, if he can get back to his, 2021 Michigan State season, maybe Auburn could be an 8-4 team. But I have to agree with Austin. I think that they'll be a bowl team. I think they'll find a way to make a bowl game, but it's still going to be very difficult for them to be a top 25 team because essentially almost every single team in the SEC West could be a top 25 team and could be a bowl team. I mean, that's how good that division is, and it's about to be going away since the SEC is abolishing divisions. But yes, I do think Auburn will be a bowl team for sure. Next team we have on deck is Baylor. This is really interesting because Baylor is another one of those teams that you just feel like a couple years ago, kind of like with Sam Pittman in Arkansas, a lot of people were high on Baylor. Dave Aranda was doing a fantastic job, but they've kind of taken a step back as well. They have not been as dominant or as high in the Big 12 as they were a couple years ago. Where do you see Baylor finishing? I think they're still really solid. I think that they're still one of the better teams in the Big 12. But where do you feel like Baylor's going to end up in 2023 on the tier list?
So I got to shout him out because he started this. And Jeffrey, you were responsible for this as well real fast. So we have a joke. They're called the Baylor Bear Necessities. Jeffrey and Jackson, who when we were a part of Young Guns, that they called them the Bear Necessities. And then they haven't won a game since. Little side story. But as far as this season goes, I don't think that curse will affect them in any way. I mean, they're in a brand new Big 12. I'm gonna say Dave Miranda gets it turned around. they could possibly be borderline bowl team, top 25, if they go anywhere from 7-5, 8-4, because the Big 12 is pretty stacked.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna put them in bowl team for right now to stay on the safe side of things. But they could very well end up in the top 25, and if they get some wins that we don't expect them to, they could end up in New Year's 6. But I'm gonna say they're gonna be at least a bowl team. I think they're firmly in that category.
Now, Kyler, he's got them going 9-3. And Baylor, is a team that I really do believe in because, again, Dave Aranda, he's a fantastic coach. But it just seems like Baylor's just kind of taking a step back. Like Austin said, I feel like they'll definitely be a bowl team. Top 25 teams possibly. It kind of depends on how TCU, how far they regress, if Kansas State regresses, how good Texas and Oklahoma do this season. If all those teams do well, Baylor's probably going to be behind those teams. But like if TCU drops back, if none of the new teams, really do anything in the Big 12 this season, Baylor could be a top 25 team. I think it's close. I would probably lean toward just putting it as a bowl team as well because there's a lot of uncertainties with Baylor. But I do think that overall, they'll still be a solid team. But I kind of agree. Troy V, perfect comment at the right time. He says Baylor found ways to lose some odd games last year. I have no faith in them. That's kind of the theme. Baylor was interesting. That Kansas State game was a perfect example. Yes, Kansas State ended up being a really solid team that made the Big 12 championship game. But a lot of people picked Baylor. That's when people are still high on Baylor. I think I went K-State, and K-State won, and then Baylor kind of just trailed off a bit. So Baylor should be solid, but they definitely have some things preventing them possibly from being a top 25 team. Next, we've got BC. Boston College, Jeff Hafley, he's on the hot seat. Boston College has really been struggling ever since Phil Dracovic couldn't stay healthy. Zay Flowers was great, but you just can't have one good receiver, and that's your whole team. Their defense struggles. Boston College overall, their talent level is just way down from where it was a few years ago. Do you think that they're a dumpster fire, Austin, or do you think that they could possibly be a bowl team or almost bowl team?
I want to be nice and give them a little love, but like you said, there's just too much going the wrong way. They get to sit next to Arizona State. Throw them in the dumpster, Jeffrey. Take out the trash.
Yeah, Kyler,
sorry, BC fans.
Right there, 2-10. Troy V says fire up the dumpster. Yeah. Put them in dumpster fire. I don't want to do it. I mean, you want to think Boston College to get back to the Matt Ryan, Doug Flutie days, but it's just not looking good right now for the Golden Eagles. And if they do have a 2-10 season, it could be the end of Jeff Hafley despite the buyout. Next up, we've got Cal. We have another dumpster fire team, or is Cal going to be a little bit better than Boston College, Arizona State this season? Cal's a team. They've got Justin Wilcox. He's on the hot seat. He's running out of time. And, I mean, it's one of those situations where Cal, since they haven't even joined a conference yet, a new conference that the Pac-12 completely dissolves, Cal's question marks just in that regard. So there's a lot of uncertainty with the program and the football team. Where do you see Cal in 2023?
Well, Jeffrey, open the dumpster again. They're going right to the dumpster. I don't think there's any question about it. Sorry, Cal. You may have the smarts, but when it comes to your football and basketball, you need some help. Fire up the dumpsters, Troy V says. They're going right on in.
Yeah, Troy V also says Cal keep BC coming in the dumpster. Kyler, though, a little more optimistic with a 6-6 prediction. Now, that would be enough to save Wilcox's job, I think, this season. If they have a really bad year, he could get fired. I never want to see anyone to get fired, but it's definitely not looking good. Cal, I have to agree in the dumpster fire. I mean, they could get some wins maybe this season, but, they lost Jack Plummer to Louisville, and there's just not a lot going for them right now. Definitely, though, our next team is going to be a lot higher, Clemson. I know Clemson's kind of taken a step back from where, they were literally going tit for tat with Alabama a few years ago as the top team in college football. Clemson doesn't utilize the transfer portal as much as some other teams do. So that's kind of like Clemson seemingly just does not have as much depth and talent as some of these other teams that are accumulating transfers. Dabo just doesn't utilize the portal. He does a great job in recruiting, though. Do you feel like Clemson is still a CFP contender this season also? Do you think they're a New Year's Six contender?
So this is another one of those Alabama kind of situations because people like to overreact way too early. Oh, is Dabo falling off the cliff? Has he lost the grip of the team? And it's like, guys, they went 10-3 last year, 11-3. Excuse me. I don't. If that's losing your grip, I would love to see what losing your grip, not losing your grip is.
Yeah.
I still think Clemson, their biggest roadblock is going to be Florida State. I mean, they're more than likely going to win the ACC again. I would say they're still a CFP contender. I think you could put them in that same category with Alabama. I think as long as Dabo's there, Clemson's going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, especially because they're in the ACC and outside of Florida State and maybe North Carolina or some other team that can, rise up and really surprise this season. I don't really think Clemson has too much competition. They're still a really talented team. And definitely Kyler, he said 12-0, but then he's got, 15-0. He's really confident in the Clemson Tigers, thinking they're going to go undefeated this year and win it all. Troy V says conference contender, impossible CFP team. Yeah, I could see how they're just a conference contender. It's kind of borderline for me. I don't think that they're a bona fide just CFP contender because they have taken a slight step back, but they're still really good. But I still think being in the ACC where it is a little bit easier, I would put them in CFP contender. Someone's got to go. There's not going to be that many teams in that group. But next, I'm sure this is a team that Austin really wants to talk about. We might talk about this one a little bit too long, but you've got Primetime and the Colorado Buffaloes. Colorado could be almost anywhere on this list according to people's prediction. They could be in dumpster fire still. They could be CFP contenders. Some people online are saying, like, they're all over the place. But where do you, Austin, think that Colorado will be this season on the tier list?
Well, first off, Jeffrey, to do the proper introduction, it's prime time, something. Well, okay, now that we got the intro out of the way, Colorado, like you said, is really interesting. Me personally, prime time's captured my heart. I hope they do really well, but gonna try to take my rooting for prime time hat off. In all honesty, I think they're a bowl team. I don't think that's too much to say. He has recruited really well, brought a lot of players over. I mean, he even has flipped a couple 5-stars in their favor, just like he did at Jackson State. I mean, he's turning that culture around. I mean, we all saw what Colorado was last year. If this was Colorado last year, fire up that dumpster. But this is primetime Colorado. He's bringing a new culture. He's injecting new life. I think they're a bowl team. Could they be top 25? Maybe that's being too nice at the moment. But I'll say bowl team. I think they're firmly in that.
This is one that I'm not disagreeing, but I don't know. I mean, Colorado is hard to figure because look at even the chat. Jackson says Clemson will dominate the ACC. I agree with you for sure, Jackson. Thanks for stopping by. Kyler Savage Sports have got Colorado at 9-3. So that would be top 25 team for sure if they're 9-3. But then you've got Troy V saying Colorado will be keeping company with BC, Cal, and Arizona State in dumpster fire. So again, that's what I'm saying. The opposite sides of the spectrum. Everyone has a differing opinion on primetime in Colorado. For me, I'm feeling 5-7 or 6-6. So for me, it's like I'm with you. I could see bowl team, but I could also see them not being a bowl team because it's his first year as a Power 5 head coach, and you're bringing all this talent together. And while it is talented, it's tough to mesh all that together. I know that it makes it a bit easier in the fact that a lot of these other teams are bringing in so many transfers as well, so it kind of makes that better. But I still feel like Colorado just has so much, of a roster overhaul. It's going to be interesting to see how it meshes together. So I don't know. I'm like borderline almost bowl team to bowl team. I could put them in bowl team if you're adamant keeping them there, but it's close.
So if you feel like they're almost bowl team, I can live with that. Mm-hmm. If you feel that that's a better positioning for them right now, we could put them in almost bowl team.
Well, the thing is the schedule as well, because the Pac-12 this season, the last year of the Pac-12 being the way that it is, USC is good. UCLA is pretty solid. Oregon State are good. Washington's good. Utah's good. Washington State's not too bad. And then they've got TCU and Nebraska in the non-conference. Like, that is extremely tough for Colorado. I mean, they could make a bowl, but they're going to have to upset some people. I feel like almost bowl team for me. Like I said, if you want him in bowl, I will. But to me, I put him here because I just feel like there's just still a lot holding him back. Just first year coach, Power 5, tough league this season, and a tough schedule.
So I'll live with that. Almost bowl team. I think that they're borderline. I agree, but we could put them in almost bowl. I'll let you have this one.
Now, up next, though, we've got the Duke Blue Devils, who, like Arizona State, BC, Cal, and Colorado of last year, was a dumpster fire program a couple seasons ago. But they've gotten better. Mike Elko's come in for the retired David Cutcliffe, and Duke's pretty solid. Granted, the ACC is not super tough, but I still feel like Duke has gotten a lot better, and they're a competent program. They've got a solid quarterback, Riley Leonard, and they could do some slight damage in the ACC this season. Do you think that they're, a bowl team, a top 25 team? Where do you have Duke this season, Austin?
So the interesting thing with Duke is how for real are they? Mm-hmm. Because let's be honest, not taking anything away from Duke, nothing of that extent. But look at their schedule last year. Mm-hmm. Going 8-4 with that schedule. I mean, it makes me question how good is Duke
with that schedule.
Yes. Like, it makes me question, is Duke actually legit, or did Duke get a favorable schedule that they were able to win as many games as they did? That's very interesting. But now this year, they open up with Clemson at home. And Clemson, as far as I'm concerned, and probably everyone else can agree, is the standard of at least the ACC. So if Duke could somehow start with an upset there, who knows what's in store for them this season. But I'm going to say put them in a bowl. I'm going to say they're a bowl team right now. I don't think they're top 25. I'm going to say bowl team, just to be on the safe side.
I would have to agree because even to Kyler's point, he's got him going 8-4. Even if Duke went 8-4, because it's the ACC and they're not playing as many quality teams, they probably wouldn't even be ranked at 8-4 like an SEC team would or a Big Ten team. So I don't think that no matter what Duke does, unless they go 9-3, they're not going to be a top 25 team. Troy V says bowl team. I think their schedule's easy enough for them to at least find a way to get 6 wins and make a bowl. I think they'll still have a decent season, but I don't think that they're going to be able to be a top 25 team. So I would definitely agree with that. Up next, though, we've got Florida, the Gators. This is another team. I don't feel like there's nowhere near as varied of opinions as Colorado, but Florida's still a team that I've seen a lot of varied opinions. I've seen people say that they could be 8-4, 9-3. Some I've even seen at 10-2. They're probably really, big Florida fans. But then I've also seen some people say that Florida is not going to make a bowl. I'm in the middle with that. I think Florida's going to be solid. I think that they'll have some success this season. Maybe they'll have a more balanced team with a quarterback, and Graham Mertz is not going to be, so inconsistent like Anthony Richardson, despite his amazing talent. It's interesting all around with Florida, but where do you have them going this season on the tier list?
So I think Florida, they're one of those teams that's very confusing, like you said, because they lost a lot of talent. Losing Anthony Richardson is going to be tough to recover from. But can Graham Mertz be Tom Brady-esque and not turn over the ball, don't take very many sacks, and just play clean, wholesome football? If they could do that, Florida could go 8-4. And with 8-4, they would be in the top 25 more than likely. But if he's getting sacked and throwing pick sixes and, fumbling the ball everywhere, that they could be keeping Cal and BC and Arizona State company in the dumpster fire. We could see possibly 3-9, 4-8. But I'll say that Billy Napier can hold some of that in, can wrangle him in. I think they're a solid bowl team. Borderline top 25, just based on SEC bias that there is sometimes.
Yeah, Kyler's got him going 6-6. Tim Prangley stopping by. He says the dream team. Appreciate that. He says, "What's up, gentlemen? Doing really good." For sure. Awesome to be doing this tier list. But Florida is a team that the talent is like with Auburn. They've got talent. They always do. It's just about whether the talent comes together and actually produces a really quality football team. Last year, talent was there, but the results were not. Will they be better this year? I don't know if Graham Mertz can get them to where a lot of Florida fans want them to be, but I do think, like you said, as long as he is not super turnover prone like he was at Wisconsin, they could be a borderline top 25 team. But I'm going to have to go with bowl team as well. I'm with you because I think they'll at least go 6-6, but I just don't know how much better. I think their defense might be a little bit better. And Billy Napier, he's a guy that, has a lot of potential to, take forward to the heights that they have not had in a few seasons. But I don't know if it's going to be this year. We got some more comments, though. Tim Prangley, he says, "You need to drop Colorado to the dumpster fire, you guys." Hey, I wrangled a lot of people back from having it higher because someone in chat had it at 9-3. Austin said bowl team, so I'm an almost bowl team. Yeah, I at least moved them back.
Tim, you gotta love the primetime train. He's gonna do great things in Colorado, and it starts this year. I'm a big believer in primetime, but Jeffrey talked me down. He brought me off the ledge about it. I almost wanted to put him in New Year's 6. No, I'm just kidding.
You got Tim saying 3 to 4 wins. 4 wins is almost a bowl team, depending on how you look at it. And then you got Troy V saying they're buying into the neon hype. Hey, again, at least I knocked it down to almost bowl team. Tim says you got to drink in that pomade. All right, we get it. I definitely am cautiously optimistic for Colorado, but I understand that New Year's 6 hype, top 25 hype is insane. I don't think Colorado is going to do that. But a team that definitely will be top 25 and has a lot of hype for maybe New Year's 6 and potentially CFP if some people are buying into it. Florida State, Jordan Travis, he's a potential Heisman candidate. A lot of people are high on the Knowles. This could be the best season they've had since the Jimbo Fisher era, and before that, the Bobby Bowden era. What are you thinking with Florida State this season, also? You think they can go all the way to the CFP, or think they're a top 25 or CFP contender?
Now, Florida State's interesting for two reasons. Number one, like you said, Jordan Travis, the hype is behind him. They're saying he's going to be the one to win Heisman, that he's going to overtake everybody else. And, and there's a lot of people out there not having that. They're saying, no, it's Caleb's to lose again, or it's Drake Mays, whoever you're a believer in. But you also have to look at their schedule. They got LSU to open the season, and then they got Clemson week 4 in Death Valley. Those are two crucial games. If they go 1-1 and then win out the rest of the way, and then win the ACC, you could see them in possible college football contention. But if they go 0-2, then it could be a little dicey. And then if they slip up somewhere to say, like, what if they happen to slip up to a Boston College?
Ooh.
Which if they do that, then there might be some serious questions going around. But I think I'm going to put them in top 25 teams. I'm not ready to put them in New Year's 6 just yet. I want to see a little bit more. I want to see if they can continue the hype, continue to build on the hype, stay consistent, and play some good football. Then I might consider bumping them up. For right now, I'm going to say they're solidly a top 25 team.
That's really interesting. I almost could go CFP, not CFP, but New Year's 6 contender. They're definitely not a CFP contender. Some people are saying it, but I do think that they could be New Year's 6. But I will say I'm with you. There's still a lot of question marks. They will be top 25, especially with the AC not being too tough. But I'll say top 25 team. I mean, you don't want to go too high because, I mean, definitely a lot of people are overhyping Florida State. But, I mean, who knows? I mean, they could be a lot better than advertised. They were really good last year. But, I mean, that bowl game against Oklahoma where they just didn't, really pull away from them, that kind of gives you some question marks there as well. I think that top 25 sounds right. They could be New Year's 6, though, if things break their way. Kyler Savage Sports, he says Florida State 8-4, so he's basically in around top 25. And then Kyler says their coach is 0-7 away games versus ranked teams. That's not a good stat. And Troy V says top 25 sounds about right. So we're all basically in consensus with the Noles. Up next, though, we've got Georgia. This is pretty easy. I mean, they've won the last 2 national titles. Kirby Smart, they're rolling. Stetson Bennett's gone. Carson Beck, new quarterback. Will he perform? But, I mean, you got an elite team every year with all the players that they get. Georgia, you would think, would be CFP contender. But maybe Austin has a different opinion. What do you have on the Georgia Bulldogs?
Yeah, you could put them in college football contender. If we had a natty tier, you could put them right there too. That they're pretty much, I think, a lock. I could be wrong, but I think they're a lock to be in the college football playoffs, if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, there's a world where they possibly fall back to earth a bit with a lot of new guys, new faces. Maybe there's a couple slip ups like Kyler. He says 10-2. I mean, 10-2 would not potentially put them in the CFP. I'm still making probably a contender, but not probably guaranteed to get in. But I still think that until other, proven otherwise, you have to put them there because they just won the last 2 titles. Tim says, yeah, Georgia, they're a bowl team. Yeah, definitely, Tim. That is for sure. They are a bowl team. And Troy B says playoff team. So most of us in consensus there.
Yeah.
But the rival of Georgia Tech, as things have not been as kind of the Yellow Jackets lately. They have not had, as much success recently. The days of Calvin Johnson, in the past, they're just not where they are right now. Georgia Tech just fired their coach, got a new coach. It's like a Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State. It just seems like it's going to be rocky at first. It's going to take time for Georgia Tech to turn this around. But what do you think, Austin? Do you think Georgia Tech will be better than dumpster fire, or where do you have them this season?
Well, I'll say this. Georgia Tech, they're really interesting because they have been known to pull some upsets within conference and out of conference. I think I want to be kind to them and say, look, we could put them in almost bowl, but at the same time, that might be a little too kind. I'm torn on almost bowl and just putting them in straight dumpster fire because they have the ability to shock the world and possibly, upset somebody. And then you're like, holy moly, who knew Georgia Tech could do that? And then there's other times where it's like, this team just needs to be disbanded altogether. Get rid of them. So, I'm borderline, but I would put them in dumpster fire. I would think dumpster fire right now.
Yeah, like you said, Georgia Tech is interesting because, I mean, even when they've been at their worst, they've kind of been like Syracuse, and they've hung with Clemson, several times. And they beat North Carolina last year, despite the fact North Carolina gave that game away. But that's beside the point. Georgia Tech definitely is a team that can surprise you sometimes. But, again, even though Kyler says 7-5, that is very, very generous for Georgia Tech. You never know, though. He says Brent Key's a good coach. I mean, Brent Key, I think he could have a lot of success with Georgia Tech. It's just going to be hard in his first season, like with any other coach taking over a program that's really struggling right now. It's going to be difficult. I think that, like you, I want to put him in almost bowl team, especially because the ACC, it's easier to get wins than in other conferences. But I'm like you, there's a lot of question marks. They could be better than this. They're not as bad of a dumpster fire as the other teams at the bottom. But for now, I think that they'll escape this soon. Like next season, they probably would be better. But I agree with you. I'll put them in dumpster fire as well for that. Illinois is up next. Illinois is interesting because last year, Brett Bielema finally had the Fighting Illini actually pretty solid. They were even ranked for brief. And there's been some positive, momentum going Illinois' way, but they're losing a lot. They're losing Tommy DeVito. They're losing Chase Brown. They're losing Sidney Brown, Devon Witherspoon. That's a lot of talent that's gone. And can Illinois replace it? They're still in the Big Ten West because the Big Ten, is not the race division just yet. It's going to be the next year. So Illinois is still in the better division. But do you think that Illinois could possibly be a top 25 team, bowl team, or where do you have Illinois in 2023?
So Brent Bielema is very interesting, Jeffrey, and Illinois. Some people are believers in him and some are not. I've heard some people say I need to see him have another good year before I can fully invest in believing in him. And then there's others that refuse to believe that he can take Illinois to new heights. For me, I'm on the side of if he can take them 8-4, 9-3, possibly again, maybe he is the guy. Maybe he can be what Illinois hopes. I'm gonna say they're a top 25 team. I know they're losing a lot, but their schedules really lines up for them. They're in the Big Ten. I think, especially if they can pull an upset here or there, I think that will favor them in the long run. I'm going to say they're a top 25 team. They're at the bottom half of the top 25, but they're there in my opinion.
I could see it. This is not like Colorado. I could put Illinois in top 25. I can see it happening because, like you said, the schedule's there for them to do it. And Brett Bielema did a great job last season. Colorado is 7-5, which if they went 7-5, they would not be top 25. To Troy's point, and this is why I struggle to see it, is they lost a lot, somewhere between bowl team and almost bowl team. I think they'll make a bowl game for sure. I do. And there is a shot that they are a top 25 team. But the guys that made Illinois what they were, all of them are gone. And can the new guys be able to replace the production? If they can, I agree with you. I think Illinois can get the job done. But if they don't, then 6-6, 7-5 is probably where they're going to be. This one's close. I can see it either way. If you want Illinois in top 25, I can put them there. But I can also see them in bowl team as well.
To Troy V's point, I see it as well. Losing Witherspoon and losing Chase Brown, those are some major pieces. Witherspoon went top 5 to the top 10, to the Seahawks. Top 10 for the Seahawks, and that's. I'm like you, Jeffrey. I'll say put them in bowl team. You kind of talked me down again.
I want to put them there. It's just tough to envision for sure. I don't know. They could be better though. Brock says, thanks for stopping by. Brock says, Alabama's coming. Don't sleep on Bama, even with the Quentin Roll Top football season is upon us. Well, Brock, for sure, we've got them up there, right there. CFP Contenders with Georgia and Clemson as well, so we're not sleeping on Bama at all whatsoever. So next, we've got Iowa State. Now, Kyler says Iowa State 7-5. That's a shocking prediction. Iowa State is a team that has completely come back to earth. When they were with Matt Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, Charlie Kohler, they were good. And they had that 11-2 season, but then they took a step back with the same guys. They took a step back. They just did not have the same season. I think they're like 7-6. But now they're really struggling. And then the news is coming out this offseason about gambling stuff. They got some players that are in trouble possibly. I don't even know all that. I'm not going to get into all that. But there's just a lot of stuff wrong with Iowa State. Matt Campbell has a lot of questions to get fixed with the Cyclones. I don't want to put them in dumpster fire because they were so good a couple years ago. But Iowa State is really falling off the map. Where do you see Iowa State in 2023?
They're another interesting one. I think I'm like you. I don't want to put them in dumpster fire, but with everything that's gone on, I think fire up the dumpster, Jeffrey. I think we got to do what's right. Put them in there.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah, as Troy V says, fire up the dumpster. Put them in there.
I mean, it hurts me. This is one that it hurts me to put this team in the dumpster fire because Iowa State was so good a couple years ago. Maybe they'll get it figured out. I mean, Matt Campbell, he did a lot at the Cyclones to make you believe that he can get them back to being really solid. But yeah, it was not pretty last season, and it might not be a very good season again for the Cyclones. But now we have the rival. Iowa, you want to talk about consistency? Iowa is probably one of the most consistent teams in college football, unless you're counting the top teams like Georgia and Alabama consistently being CFP contenders. But you're talking about a team that just consistently does the same thing. It's Iowa. They're like the epitome of 8-4. You look at Kirk Ferentz's tenure. It's 8-4, and it's 8-4, and it's 8-4. And it rounds out when you do his entire record around 8-4, 66, 67% of games. That is Iowa football. Their defense is great. Phil Parker is an elite defense coordinator. The offense has so many problems. Yes, they got McNamara from Michigan. He's a good quarterback. They always have good tight ends, some decent offensive linemen, but I don't know. Iowa. I've seen people say they could go 11-1 because of McNamara and the schedule, but I just don't know if Iowa's there. I mean, they're always a borderline top 25 team, 8-4 every year. But where do you think Iowa's going to be in 2023?
So I've seen that too as well, Jeffrey. Some people are really high on Iowa. Some people are saying that their two biggest games this year are going to be Penn State, Wisconsin, which we'll get to. And they're predicting that those will either be their two losses or their one, or they could run the table, go unbeaten, and somehow win the Big Ten and make the CFP. But I think it's safe to say we can. For me, I would say that they're a top 25 team. I wouldn't go New Year's Six contender, but I would say they're safely a top 25 team.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean, I was one of those teams that a lot of people believe in every year as a solid team. They're ranked 25, literally right now in the preseason. So if they go 8-4, they're gonna probably finish like 25th. So yeah, I'm with you. I just don't really see Iowa doing much better. I know a lot of people again are high on Iowa, and maybe they'll do better, but they haven't really fixed their offensive issues overall. So I think that they'll just be a top 25 team. Some of the comments real quick. Brock says, I think the QB battle work itself out, talking about Bama. I think Texas having a game plan for two quarterbacks will, help Bama out. That's interesting for sure. Kyler says Iowa starts 0-2, goes 6-6. He's not high on Iowa. Very interesting. Then Troy B says Iowa's an easy scale division contender. So he says, division contender, that would maybe possibly put him toward New Year's Six, but I think top 25 for sure makes sense. Division contender, if they win the West at 8-4-ish, though, that wouldn't put them in New Year's Six. But I know what you mean for sure. Definitely Troy B. Then we've got Kansas State. Kansas State obviously made the Big 12 championship game last year. They were really good. And Deuce Vaughn was a fantastic running back. He was great, but he's gone. And Adrian Martinez is gone, but that's not too bad of an issue because of the fact Will Howard actually was pretty good. He came in midseason and was performing even better than Adrian Martinez on most nights. So K-State could still be in good shape. But I do think that they could take a step back as well. So it's interesting overall. What do you think about Kansas State in 2023?
So, like you said, it's very interesting because they did lose a lot. Deuce Vaughn was a do-it-all back, almost like a Christian McCaffrey type back. Could run, catch, do all your fundamentals. The quarterback situation, like you said, I think figured itself out. They've got their guy now. We have to remember Kansas State won the Big 12 last year. I want to say that they're possibly a New Year's Six contender again. I know they did lose a lot of talent. I know that's a big factor, but I want to say that I think they're going to be a contender to win the Big 12 again and get back to the New Year's Six. But you can argue the other way that they should just be in top 25. It's 50-50 for me. What do you think, Jeffrey? Which way are you leaning?
I don't know if I'm just, picking conservatively with these. I have no idea, but I seem to go lower on a lot of these because I'm with you. I want to put K-State in New Year's Six, but they lost a couple good defensive players. Deuce Vaughn was so important to the offense. It's almost like, for me, what if it's like a Kenneth Walker situation at Michigan State, how he led that team to a New Year's Six game. And then the next year he's gone, and then they completely fell off the cliff. They didn't even make a bowl game. So I don't think Kansas State's going to do that, obviously. But for me, it's very hard for me to see them repeat. If they repeat, it means either that Will Howard has an elite season, or the Big 12 has a bunch of teams that underperform. Like Oklahoma didn't do well this season again, or TCU really fell off. Kansas State, somebody's got to get there. So K-State making it, to me, would mean that that's the case. And, again, I just feel like Deuce Vaughn was so important to that offense. I probably will have to put Kansas State in top 25. I think they'll be a top 25 team, but it's gonna be hard to really envision them being, a New Year's Six team. I think they could do it, but it's gonna have to be a lot of things that go their way. Kyler, those confident. He says K-State 11-2, lost to Texas twice. That's really interesting right there. I mean, that would put him in New Year's Six for sure. Anthony Easton, thanks for stopping by. He says, no Indiana. I can inform Anthony. We can go and do it now if you want, but we have Indiana and Louisville at the end. We're saving those two teams for last to give special consideration to those two teams, because definitely the team to talk about a lot of stuff. So we are going to get to the Indiana Hoosiers. Tim says someone has to say it mid-12. Instead of the Big 12, he's got the mid-12. Troy V says thinking they'll end up a bowl team just on Kansas State. Troy says, I thought they were out of Misfits. That's funny. And Anthony says the guy whose team lost to Tulane. Very interesting for sure, definitely. So we've got up next K-State's rival Kansas. Now, Kansas was a dumpster fire for the last decade until very, very recently. Lance Leopold has turned them around. They made a bowl game last year. Kansas has improved. Are they going to keep improving, though? Or are they kind of like stuck at where they're at? Or could they get worse again? Where do you see the Kansas Jayhawks in 2023?
Jeffrey, you mean to tell me Kansas plays football? I thought they only play basketball. Like, what the heck? Now we have to watch them in football, too? Oh, man.
Yeah,
but
they're not bad.
But for Kansas, I want to say, there would have been a point in time where we would just said, fire up the dumpster, throw him in there. But Lance Leopold's got him going. Jalen Daniels, if he hadn't gotten hurt, Kansas might have won more games than they did. But he got hurt, and the season kind of derailed, and then the magic was over. Then the talks of, Kansas might be a surprise New Year's Six. Well, then that talk fizzled out. But for this year, I think they're a solid bowl team again. I think Lance Leopold's kind of going in the right direction. I would say you can put them in bowl teams.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. Jalen Daniels had Kansas's offense at another level. Jason Bean, he's good. He's really good. He won that Texas game the year before when they only won like 3 games, and they beat Texas when Texas was really struggling. They was like a 57-55 game. So Jason Bean can play, but Jalen Daniels takes that offense to another level. He's just got another, he's got more in him. Just he has more ability, more talent. Both are really solid quarterbacks, though. But yes, you are right for sure. Kansas's hype kind of went down a bit when Jalen Daniels went out, but I think that there's enough there with Kansas. The hype is it's simmered. I don't think anyone's really expecting Kansas to do great things this year, but I think they could get back to a bowl. I almost want to put them in almost bowl teams just because of the fact that I feel like their talent is not really at bowl team. Like these other teams that are in bowl teams are more talent overall, but I do think that Kansas could repeat. Basically, like Troy V's kind of right here 100%. He says, thinking Kansas almost bowl team, they really slipped back the last half of the season. That's the way I'm seeing it. I'm like, they're almost like right on the fringe, but I will keep them at bowl team. Kyler says Kansas 10-2 loss to Texas, Kansas State. That is a bold prediction for Kansas. That would be crazy if they did that. That would be one of the biggest stories of the season. And to be fair, like Tim says, Jalen can get hot, and he's back. So, he like you said, Kansas was on track to do better when he was in, and then he got hurt. So with him being back and if he stays healthy, maybe Kansas could be top 25. But I think bowl team is fair, at least for now. Up next, we have Austin's favorite team, Kentucky. The Wildcats, they're a team that overall, Mark Stoops has definitely had them playing better football than they were before he was that coach, but they've kind of slipped a bit. They're not as good as they were a couple of years ago. Like when they had Benny Snell, they were like 9-3, 10-2 sometimes. Now they're kind of like 7-5, 8-4 again, 6-6 sometimes. Where do you see the Kentucky Wildcats in 2023? And no, they're not your favorite team. I know.
So, me putting my biased hat on, just say fire up the dumpster, put them next to Iowa State. But we have to be realistic on this. I'm going to say Mark Stoops is going to have them. As much as I don't like to say it, I think Mark Stoops is going to have them in the top 25. I think Kentucky wins games that they shouldn't. I mean, they finally have Florida's number. I think Kentucky, they're either, to me, they're borderline just a bowl team or in the top 25. It could go either way for me right now. What do you think, Jeffrey? Which way do you lean?
Kyler says 9-3, which would obviously, being in the SEC, would easily make them top 25. Then you got Anthony. He says 7-5. That would make them a bowl team, but not a top 25 team. Troy V says almost bowl team just because they lost their quarterback. As obviously, Will Levis, he's gone. They did get Devin Leary from NC State, but still, I think that Will Levis, his top end talent's probably over Leary's, but I feel like Leary can be more consistent than Will Levis. Will Levis was definitely up and down, kind of like Anthony Richardson. I don't know. I'm with you. I think I could see them specifically because they're in the SEC East. It's easier than the West. Obviously, last year's division, so that's not going to matter in the future, but this last season it will. Because they're in the East, I think that they could be a top 25 team. They could get to 8-9 wins, but I'm probably going to go bowl team. I'm going to say that they'll probably go like 7-5. I mean, they'll be good, but there is a lot of question marks. Kentucky just hasn't been better than that for a few seasons now. So I think that overall, bowl team sounds fair. They could be top 25 though. It is pretty close.
So bowl team's good.
Up next, though, we got LSU. This one's crazy because obviously the AP polls come out for the preseason. They're fifth. So people are high on them. They had a good season last year. They had a good season. Beating Alabama was great, on that 2-point conversion. But they also just completely fell apart against Texas A&M at the end of the regular season. And then they got demolished against Georgia, which, to be fair, most teams did. But that's high at number 5 to start this season based on the way they ended last season. I think that LSU is a team that has varying opinions. I could see anywhere from top 25 to possible CFP contender. Where do you have the LSU Tigers this season, Austin?
So they're an interesting team, like you said. Brian Kelly, let's be honest, he's got a lot of hype. There's people within the media saying that he's already past Nick Saban, that which is crazy to think. He's been there 1 year and they got lucky and fell in on a 2-point conversion, and the talking heads are already saying BK is better than Nick Saban was.
To be fair, Alabama had a better season last year than LSU. I get it. First year, maybe higher than what Saban was when he took over Alabama, but still, I don't know about that. It's not even close.
I agree. I think people need to chill. You want to talk about, Tim's comment earlier, people drinking the Primeade. People are drinking the BK Kool-Aid. They're like drinking 2 cups a sitting. I mean, we might need to take those things away from them. Good grief. I mean, LSU, although all kidding aside, though, LSU is really talented. Jaden Daniels, he's a very talented quarterback. You can argue he's one of the 5 best, 10 best in college football altogether when healthy and playing his best. But I think LSU, I would say they're a New Year's 6 team right now. I think that's fair. I mean, especially if they could beat Florida State, and then if they could, beat Alabama, and then possibly win the SEC. People I know are saying that they're going to be in the Natty and they're going to be in the college football playoffs. That's a little too soon. I would say New Year's Six is fair. Where do you lean on this, Jeffrey? Give us some insight.
I think literally that their outcomes could be top 25 all the way to possible CFP contender. I could see it if everything broke their way. But still, as the chat would they point out, Kyler says LSU 10-2 lost to Mississippi State and Bama. That wouldn't put them in the CFP. And then Tim says they have a very soft SEC conference schedule. We know what their out of conference schedule is like. They win 10 games. But everyone's saying 10 games. 10 games is New Year's Six. So I think that they'll be really good, and I think they're going to have a lot of success. If they can beat Florida State, I think that would propel them to possibly, get to where they want to be and maybe in the CFP. But if they lose Florida State, I know it would be an early loss, but then it would be extremely difficult for them to win out the rest of the way, and that would probably prevent them from getting there. I think that at the end of the day, I think they're going to be New Year's Six as well. I think they'll just be right on the outside. They'll have a great season, but I think they'll fall a little bit short of their CFP dreams.
Which, by the way, Jeffrey, before we move on, did you notice that LSU is our first team we put in New Year's Six? We are hard on some of these teams.
Yeah, definitely.
We're not giving them no.
Just
We're
one
not giving
right
none
there.
of them.
So up next, we got Maryland. Now, Maryland's a team that a few years ago was fighting for a bowl berth every year. They would probably be an almost bowl team every single year. Never really were a dumpster fire. But Maryland's improved. I mean, they've kind of replaced where Indiana was a couple of years ago when Indiana was like that fourth team in the East. They kind of was getting past Michigan State a little bit and was competing with the top three. Well, now it's like Maryland. Maryland's that team now. They got talent. They don't have a lot of depth. That's the problem. Maryland never has a lot of depth, and they usually do run out of depth at the end of the season, especially if some injuries happen, which Maryland always seems to suffer a lot of injuries every single year. But Maryland's a team that I could see top 25 if everything breaks their way, and I can see bowl team. Where do you see the Terps finishing in 2023?
So I would like to think the big key is can Tua Tagovailoa, Tua's younger brother, can he stay healthy? If he stay healthy, Maryland could have themselves possibly a 9-3 season. I don't know if that would be a stretch, but I think I would say they're a bowl team, borderline top 25, like you said, Jeffrey. A New Year's Six might be too much hype for them right now. I know their schedule, they do have a rough schedule, but they also have very winnable games. But I'm going to say they're a bowl team. What do you think?
Yeah, I want to say that they could be a top 25 team because I think it's possible. But like you said, there's a lot of tricky games. And, I mean, if you slip up to one team, whether it's Michigan State or Indiana or something like that, that's going to keep you from being top 25. Like, you have to beat all those teams and then, lose, those top games. Because Maryland has not really been able to prove they could beat Penn State or Michigan or Ohio State really at all. Yeah, it's already 3 losses. I mean, if you lose to anyone else, it basically almost takes you out of top 25 contention. I think they'll make a bowl game. They have a lot, more talent than they used to. Loxley's done a solid job, especially on the offensive side of the ball there. But I do think that they might just fall short of being a top 25 team. Up next, we've got one of those supremely talented football teams that every single year people are expecting great things. Texas A&M, a lot of the teams have that, those aspirations every single year. Miami as well. They have struggled since 2003 mightily, but when in their heyday, they were an elite program. They just have not gotten it together since. They still have talent, but I think that, it just doesn't seem like Miami still can get it together. Mario Cristobal, people are expecting big things because of what he did at Oregon, but will this be the year they get it together? Where do you see the Miami Hurricanes in 2023?
Okay, so we don't need to have a conversation. Let's just put them up there in college football contender, Jeffrey, because the U's going to win it all. I mean, this is just common sense. Every time I hear it, if you listen to Miami fans, they're gonna win it all. So not even a conversation. We'll hear no other arguments. But no, all seriousness though, all seriousness. Miami, like you said, supremely talented. It all depends on what they want to do because I could almost see putting Miami in almost bowl team. Like I know that's crazy to say, but let's be honest. They lost to Middle Tennessee State and then had 8 turnovers to Duke. I mean, that's just where. What are you thinking, Jeffrey? Maybe that'll help me a little bit because I'm conflicted with him.
I'm kind of stumped too, to be honest, because I mean Tyler Van Dyke, he's got talent, he can play, and I think that again, Miami. I mean, I think that the talent is always there. It's true with Miami, but I do feel like that they're not getting as much talent as they used to. But since Cristobal has been the coach, the recruiting's going up again. But like you said, they were a lot worse than they needed to be last year. Like if Miami had just not had those games against Duke and against, Middle Tennessee State, they would have been a bowl team. Like they were not bad. But overall, it is what it is. But I think that even though a lot of people probably will disagree, I feel like Miami is a bowl team based on talent alone. They got to get it done this time. I know that's crazy, but it's not going to take much. It's not going to take a lot for them to be a bowl team. All they got to do is just win against teams that they're better than on paper, on talent. And if they get that done with Chris Paul's second season, I think that they can be a bowl team. I want to put them here, based on the fact that they have not shown anything in a long time, especially recently, that they can really do better than even get close to the aspirated people were saying for them. But I think that they can maybe get to 6. I think that they possibly could get to 6 wins. It's gonna be close.
I can get with that. Good. They're one of those ones. They're tricky. I mean, it could go either way, but bowl team works.
Yeah, Kyler says 4-8, so he's not high on Miami. Maybe that one will backfire, but they could possibly get to 6 wins. Tim says, I'm going to need to go to bed for work tomorrow. Skip to USC. I got you, Tim. Let's go over to USC. So up here, they're going to be a team. We're moving them up here to get them in position to move them up on the tier list. Definitely, they're not going to be at the bottom of this list. USC is either going to be tier 6 or CFP. Definitely, because the way they played last year, their offense is great. Their defense struggled, but their defense could be better this year. They got a lot more talent. Where do you see USC Austin in 2023?
Honestly, Jeffrey, put them in the dumpster.
Troy V.
See, they understand Lincoln Riley's no good. Caleb Williams is absolute garbage. I mean, let's just put him in the dumpster. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, Tim. Love you. But in all seriousness, USC's, I think they're a New Year's 6 contender.
Ooh.
Do we? They're college football playoff contender. Do we want to put them with the Georgias, Alabamas, Clemsons of the world? Jeffrey, what do you think?
I am so close on this. It's all going to come down to the D and how good the other teams in the Pac-12 are. Because the problem with the Pac is it's so good this year. Utah, Oregon, Oregon State, Washington, all those teams are good. And if USC slips up, and they play Notre Dame too, if they slip up a couple times, that takes them out of CFP. They're going to have to probably only lose 1 game. If they lose 2 games, it is going to be almost impossible for the committee to put them in a 14 playoff. They have to only lose once, and they play a lot of tough teams.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's one or the other. I'm seeing a lot of CFP. Kyler says CFP. Tim's mad at you. He's got mad face. Obviously, he's not super mad, but you know how it is. Troy V says, I said that for 10 minutes, I think New Year's 6 or CFP. Again, it's close. It's very good. Tim says also this is not good for my blood pressure right before bed. I don't know. I want to put him in CFP. The defense has to get better. The defense is average. I still feel like they might not be CFP. Anthony says New Year's 6. That's kind of where I'm leaning. If they do make the CFP, though, Tim is never going to let us live this down. I think it's so close. They're almost there, but I'm going to put them next. We'll put them in front just so Tim will be happy that they're in front of Brian Kelly and LSU. But there they are, New Year's 6.
And
Tim
real quick, there's nothing.
Get better. Oh man, they're gonna be good.
There's no USC bias here. It's just really hard, especially with that schedule. Oregon, Utah, Notre Dame, plus Washington, and UCLA can be tricky. I mean, I think they could go anywhere from 10-2 to possibly 9-3 if things don't happen to break their way.
They go 11-1. They can get in the CFP, obviously, but it's just going to be hard. Kyler says natty contender. It tips, I'm going to watch replays, so help me if you guys put the 0 in the playoffs. We will have words. And then he says, good stuff, guys. Good night. Oh, man. So we're not making friends here, Austin. We should have just put him in CFP. I don't know. It's so close. It's so close. But I got him in New Year's 6. Thanks for stopping by, Tim. And definitely, hopefully, we can make you happy on with the rest of the picks. It was very close. Troy B says, have a good one, Tim. So up next, on to our next team. Back to the alphabetical order, we've got the Spartans of Michigan State. Now, they were a team a couple years ago. They were great. 11-2, Kenneth Walker, Peyton Thorne, all that kind of stuff. Jalen Naylor, Jaden Reed at wide out. Everything was going really good. Mel Tucker got a contract extension. And then they went 5-7 last year. They were horrible. And they lost to Indiana in the old brass platoon. Interesting circumstance. There was snow in that game, but still. It was a double overtime game. But Michigan State talent is not looking that great. They've gotten some portal guys, but I don't really see a lot on Michigan State's roster. I mean, maybe some guys will surprise, but I'm not really confident in the Spartans. I'm not thinking bowl team. I don't know what you think. Where do you have the Spartans? But things are not looking up for Michigan State right now.
So Michigan State, they had that fantastic season in 21. Kenneth Walker and company, they won a big New Year's 6 bowl, but then they underperformed last season. And like you said, the talent's not there as it once was. I think, obviously, I think they're still a bowl team, but since they're in the Big Ten, it makes me question if they do win some more games than they did last year, would they be borderline top 5? That's where I kind of stand. I still think they're a bowl team, but since they play in the Big Ten, there is that question of, are they a top 25 team still?
Tim says it's a good call, guys. Appreciate it. Kyler says 111. Troy V says dumpster fire. Anthony Easton says almost bowl. I don't know. I mean, it's tough because I think a lot of people think still that Michigan State, they're better than Rutgers. They're better than Indiana. Maybe they could even possibly be better than Maryland, but Maryland's looking pretty solid. And they lost to Indiana last year. They beat Rutgers, but Michigan State just did not look good last season. And granted, if they beat Indiana, they make a bowl at 6-6, and maybe the narrative be a little different. But they haven't done anything really in this offseason that really is inspiring. I mean, I see your point, Austin. I see, that they could possibly, be a team that can rebound, make a bowl, if they can get things figured out. But, I mean, I'm just not confident in Michigan State. I mean, they lost Peyton Thorne. That's a really tough loss. And, I mean, they got a lot of quarterback, question marks all around. I mean, literally, Troy V says, do they have a quarterback? I mean, I can't, it's definitely not a notable name. So that's not a good sign. I mean, I think one of the returning quarterbacks that they have is possibly going to be their starter. The name's not coming to me as of this time, but I remember he was the backup last year. But I don't know. I mean, I think that Michigan State. I'm gonna have to say almost bowl team. If you want me to put them in bowl team, Austin, I can. But I think they're gonna go 5-7. I don't think they're gonna do any better.
So my thing is if you want to put them in almost bowl, we can, but you can also see the other side of it. I think let's put them in almost bowl. I think almost bowl is right, and if they do make a bowl, people can come back and eradicate us.
Yeah, it's close. It's close, kind of like with USC with CFP or New Year's Six. But I gotta go with almost bowl team. There's just a lot of question marks. Kyler says, please do Texas. Please need to go to bed. Okay, I got you. Let's do Texas real quick for Kyler. I appreciate you for being here in the chat. And again, appreciate the super chat from earlier. Really do appreciate it. What Texas, are they back? Or how back are they? They've got Quinn Ewers. They've got Arch Manning. Like, Quinn Ewers presumably has the job locked up. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people that are saying that Arch Manning could take the job from him. I would go with Quinn Ewers unless he just struggles because of the fact, looking at it, he has experience. Arch Manning's a freshman. You don't really want to throw him into the fire too early. I think Texas is going to be good. I think that the Big 12 has a lot of teams that have a lot of question marks, a lot of teams that are taking step backs. This could help Texas rise to the occasion and be a really solid team. This could be their year, but it's been a could it be their year for a long time. Where do you see Texas in 2023, Austin?
So for me personally, it's always funny. Texas is back, baby. Sam Ellinger had to jinx them. But I think, their biggest game is going to be Alabama. I think that's going to show us a lot. Like you said, who's quarterback one. I think most people are assuming it's going to be Ewers for at least this year, and then Arch can take over. But as for Texas, if they could put it all together, I would say you could put them in New Year's Six. But I can also see a world where they're just a bowl team, and I can also see a world where you could say top 25. I'm leaning between those three. I would say put them in top 25 for right now, but if you want to put them possibly somewhere else you can. But for me, they're a top 25, borderline New Year's Six.
Yeah, I can definitely see all three, which makes it very tough to make a pick. Usually you want to go in the middle. But real quick before I do a deep dive there, appreciate you for stopping by. The Jackson Vikings own you. Yeah, you definitely do. You beat me pretty good. That's definitely a guy from the football gym. Really appreciate you for stopping by, man. But I would have to say, since like you said, you could see, anywhere in that range, bowl team, top 25, New Year's Six, you could go with any of those three. I have to go in the middle. I think they're going to be a top 25 team. I think they'll at least go 8-4. If Texas is 8-4, they're ranked because it's Texas, and the AP voters are going to rank Texas in the top 25 if they're 8-4. Because, like I said, they're a brand team. They're going to do it. They'd have to at least be 10-2, probably be near 6. I could see it, especially with the Big 12, possibly. Again, having some teams that are taking a step back. Like Anthony said, top 25 for Texas, maybe near 6. That's kind of where I'm at. It's borderline for both. But I will say I think that Texas will probably just go around 9-3 and be in the top 25. Fall just short of New Year's 6. But they will have a really solid season. As Troy V said, can Texas do some of that talent this year? They have to stop losing games. They should be winning 100%. That is the epitome of Texas. They just keep losing to teams they shouldn't. When they're better than like Texas Tech last year. That was a game they should have won. Bijan Robinson had a tough fumble. That's the game they should have won, and that held them back. And then they fell apart against Oklahoma. They were running, all that kind of stuff. That's the way Texas is. And then Jack says, no, Sam Ellinger was a national treasure. Sam Ellinger, he was really good at Texas for sure. But just never, outside of that win over Georgia, could just never really get Texas, all the way. It's really unfortunate. But, yeah, I think Texas will have a really solid season. They could be better than just top 25 team, but we'll have to see. Michigan's up next. And I'm sure most people are probably in a consensus that Michigan is probably a CFP contender. Maybe New Year's Six if people think they'll take a step back. But they've got basically everybody back. They've got Blake Corum back. They've got Donovan Edwards back. They've got J.J. McCarthy back. They've still got a really solid defense. And it's the Big Ten. It's going to be Ohio State, more than likely, in Michigan. Maybe you could look at Penn State. We'll get to those teams, obviously. But Michigan, they're looking really solid because basically almost everyone in Port's back. Roman Wilson's back at wide receiver. They've got a lot of guys back. Do you think that they're a CFP contender again? Also, you think they'll take a step back slightly in 2023?
So, the interesting thing with Michigan is, which we'll get to Ohio State and Penn State, that's going to determine their season. Because if they lose to Penn State but beat Ohio State, but win the Big Ten, it depends on where everyone's seated and, kind of that thing. Because we have to take a lot of this into account. But I'm going to say for right now, I'm going to say CFP contender because I think Michigan will run the table. Again, I think they'll win the Big Ten. I'll say CFP contender. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I could see a world like Troy V said, 10-2, top 25. They lose to Penn State and Buckeyes. I could see that. I mean, Penn State has hype, and Ohio State is Ohio State. I mean, it's going to be tough for Michigan to win a third time in a row. It's going to be extremely tough. I could see them, losing 2 games, not making the Big Ten championship game, and being New Year's Six. I could see it. But on the other hand, I think that Michigan, they have so much talent back that I think they'll find a way to possibly, get back to the playoffs. They just have so much talent there. And a lot of guys came back for that reason alone. So I do think that Michigan is going to be a CFP contender. Even if they don't make it at the end of the day, they will contend for a large portion of the season. So it's going to be really interesting there. Up next, we've got 2 teams definitely that are about the same. I'm pretty sure they're about to be the same on the chart. But Minnesota's up first. Minnesota's a team that a lot of people like to coach. PJ Fleck, because he is a guy that just rallies his team, has a lot of people that just, really like the way he coaches, what he's doing up there in Minneapolis. The Golden Gophers are a team that they're like Iowa in a way where they kind of do about the same every year. But I feel like sometimes Minnesota's a little bit below Iowa. They really struggle to beat Iowa specifically for whatever reason. Just can't get over the top against the Hawkeyes. But Minnesota, I have a lot of varying potential positions for them. I mean, Mo Ibrahim's gone. That's tough. There's some question marks at quarterback. Tanner Morgan's gone. Is Athan Kalakmis, is he going to have success because he's the new quarterback? They have solid defense. Like Minnesota has a lot of things going for them. And they're in the weaker side of the Big Ten as always in the West. Where do you see Minnesota in 2023?
So for me, Minnesota, a lot of people are down on PJ Fleck saying that this might be Minnesota's worst year yet. That when North Carolina, the second game of the year, a lot of people are saying that North Carolina is going to torch their defense. Their offense is going to be bad. I think it's hard for me to – I think Minnesota's borderline top 25 bowl team for me personally. Now, I don't know how you think, Jeffrey, but the way the Big Ten is and the way they're out of conference is, they could very much be a top 25 team. But they could also just be a bowl team at the end of the day. Which way are you leaning?
Yeah, if they beat North Carolina, they could be a top 25 team at the end of the season. But they got to beat North Carolina. That's going to be a tough game. And Minnesota, again, being in the Big Ten West, it gives them a shot to go 8-4 on a consistent basis. And that's going to be the biggest thing when the divisions go away in the Big Ten. All these teams that have consistently gone 8-4, 7-5, 9-3 in the West all the time, how are they going to perform now that they're in the Big Ten all with the same teams? Everyone's playing, similar schedules, as similar and exact as possible. It can't be obviously equal every year for everybody, but it's going to be a lot more equal. How are these teams going to perform in the new Big Ten? But obviously that does not affect the season. But I think that Minnesota could be top 25 if they go 8-4. Because usually 8-4 in the Big Ten is enough to be at the back end of the top 25. But Minnesota has a lot of question marks. Their offense has a lot of question marks. Their run game has a lot of more question marks than before with Mo Ibrahim. I think that their quarterback play is very, very, concerning because we don't know how Athan Kalakmis is going to do. If he performs, then they could be pretty good, but we just don't really know. Troy Visa's Minnesota drops to a bowl team. I think that they could be top 25 just because of the fact they're in the Big Ten West and they could get it done. But I'm gonna have to go with bowl team as well. I think that 7-5, 6-6 is more likely. They'll make a bowl game, but there's a lot of question marks for the Gophers. Up next, though, and this is a sad team to talk about because obviously Mississippi State, Mike Leach passing away after the season, regular season was just awful. It was so sad that happened because, he was doing a good job with the Bulldogs, and, he was one of the liveliest coaches in college football. People loved and respected Mike Leach, doing great things wherever he was at, Texas Tech, Washington State, and Mississippi State. He always, had success with his air raid offense. Well, now, unfortunately, he's gone, and Mississippi State is a mystery. They're in the toughest division in the sport, in the SEC West, final year of that division. And basically, you're looking at a team that has talent because they're in the SEC. But how is the team going to perform? Because you have Will Rogers back, and that's good. But will the offense be the same? Will they run the offense, the new coach run the offense like Mike Leach that Will Rogers is used to, or will they change the offense? And that's the thing I'm wanting to see, because I feel like if they change the offense, it could really mess up Mississippi State because of the way that team was used to running that offense. But then on the other hand, if they change it, that you could say, well, that could help because we got a new coach and, I know how to implement the system and I can get you to learn it. But if they don't change it, then that coach might not know how to run the offense as well as Mike Leach did the same way. So either way you go, Mississippi State is just all over the place. They hired the defensive coordinator anyway, so he's more of a defensive-minded coach. I'm just really interested to see what Mississippi State's going to look like. It's probably not going to be air raid, but if it's not the air raid offense, how is it going to look? How are they going to perform? They're in a tough division. I could see Mississippi State missing a bowl game, falling off, but I could also see them still being a really solid team because they do have a lot of solid players back. Where do you see Mississippi State?
So for me, I think, rest in peace to the great Mike Leach. That's a tough loss that we all suffered, especially from his days at Washington State, would say some of the funniest stuff or just like come from. But for Mississippi State, they're a big unknown, like you said, Jeffrey. Obviously Will Rogers is back. He's a big part of that offense. But will the new coach run the offense like Mike Leach? Will he be more run-eccentric? Will he mix it up more? We don't know. For me, I think they're a 5-7, 6-6 kind of team this year. For me, I would say they're almost a bowl team. I'd put them in almost bowl team. But I can also see a world where they're a bowl team. What do you think, Jeffrey?
It's tough because the SEC West, every team is not bad. There's not a bad team in the SEC West. Even Auburn, they've struggled lately, but they're not a bad team. They could beat a lot of the bottom dwellers in other conferences. Mississippi State is a good team, and they've got, again, a lot of solid guys returning, but it's just going to be a mystery to see how this new version of Mississippi State performs. And being in the tough SEC West, somebody's got to lose, and it could be Mississippi State. They could drop off. They could be, 6-6, 5-17. I want to put them in bowl team so badly because I think that the talent's there, but I'm kind of with you in a way as well. I kind of feel like there's so much mystery with Mississippi State. It's close, but I could definitely see them going 5-7 as well because of the fact that no more Mike Leach, unfortunately, and just seeing how the Bulldogs respond to, basically a new everything, a new style of play, and just all that. It's going to be really, really tough for the Bulldogs, and it's close. I can see them going 6-6. I can definitely see them being a bowl team, but it's very close. But, yeah, I can see almost bowl team as well. Up next, we got Missouri. And Missouri is a team that has a coach on the hot seat, Eli Drinkwitz. He needs to win. If not, he's going to more than likely follow in the footsteps of Barry Odom, and he's going to lose his job at Missouri. But Missouri is a team in the East, so they have that advantage. Even though they're one of the most Western teams in the SEC, they're somehow in the SEC East. The geography's messed up, but still, it doesn't make sense. But Missouri, they're in the East, so that helps, and that's what's allowed them to get 6-6 wins in the past, because they're in the West. They probably be 3-9, 4-8 every year. The East helps, but Missouri, I'm not hearing a lot of hype from Missouri. I'm hearing a lot of people saying probably not a bowl team. What are your thoughts on Missouri in 2023?
So for me personally, I honestly think we can put Missouri in dumpster fire. I think it's time to fire up the dumpster again. Iowa State's getting lonely in there, and they need some company. I think Missouri is going to be that company. I'm not very high on them. I think they'll go 4-8, 3-9, because their schedule is rough. I have them losing to Vandy.
Ooh.
For me, I want to put them in dumpster fire, but what do you see them as, Jeffrey? Do you think it'll be that bad, or do you think they're still almost a bowl team, or they are a bowl team?
That's tough because of the fact that I look at Missouri, and again, them being in the East to me helps them, get more wins, and the fact that you have to be pretty bad in the SEC to be like 3-9, because of the fact that you have a lot of easy non-conference games. But and plus, this is like make or break for Eli Drinkwitz. He's got to win. I think at least 5, but probably 6 wins to keep his job. I think he's got a decent buyout, but still, we're getting in an era now where buyouts don't matter. If you're not performing, you're gone. I would say that they're an almost bowl team, possibly, because I think they could win 5 games maybe. But even if they go 4-8, like to your point, it's because they're just not very good. And being in the East, to only win 4 games is not great. I'll honor your request and put them in dumpster fire. I think that they're the best team in dumpster fire, but I think that they could almost be a almost bowl team. But I see a lot of problems with Missouri as well. I understand why they could be in dumpster fire, but they're not a dumpster fire by much. Up next, we have NC State. This is an interesting team because of the fact that NC State is pretty consistent, especially lately. Dave Doran has had the Wolfpack going 7-5, 8-4 a lot recently. They've been good. I mean, they've even cracked the top 25 at times. They've had some success, but they just lost Devin Leary to Kentucky. That hurts. And we don't know how NC State is going to respond for that, because some teams, you lose a quarterback, you can replace him. I don't really know if NC State has replaced, Leary. So they have a lot of question marks. Where do you see the Wolfpack in 2023?
So for me personally, NC State's a borderline bowl team, top 25 for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think they could be a top 25 team still. They hit the injury bug last year. They went down 4 quarterbacks and kind of lost them their season. And they're interested because if they can stay healthy, they could be one of the best teams in the ACC. That's how good they could possibly be. But since they can't stay healthy, I have some questions. And like you said, Devin Leary being gone is a big hit, because when Devin Leary was out, NC State didn't perform as well. I would say for me, put them in bowl team for now. They could be upgraded to top 25, but I'm going to say put them in bowl team right now. What are your thoughts, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think that they have the potential, especially being in the ACC, to be top 25. They go 8-4. It's not impossible, but without Leary and question marks at quarterback and, some of the other positions, I think that they'll make a bowl game, because Dave Doran's been consistent with that. But it is kind of hard to envision them doing better than that. It's not impossible for them to be a top 25 team, and there is a world where they even somehow slip and fall to almost bowl team, but I think that they will make a bowl game at the end of the day. They'll find a way to get to 6. Another team is really interesting. Is former, and still probably in a lot of people's minds, current blue blood of college football, Nebraska. Nebraska is a team that ever since Tom Osborne era's ended, it started to fall. After Bo Pelini, it got worse. And then they leave the Big 12 for the Big 10, and it got even worse. And Nebraska has just completely bottomed out. Scott Frost, it didn't work, despite everyone being shocked that it didn't work, because when he got hired from UCF, obviously his alma mater, he was quarterback in Nebraska back in the 90s. A lot of people thought it was just going to be a slam dunk hire. It didn't pan out. And now Nebraska's turning to Matt Rule, who has turned programs around the past. He turned Temple around. He turned Baylor around. He couldn't turn the Panthers around. That's the NFL. It's different than college. So people are still high on Matt Rule, despite him not being able to turn around, the Panthers and the NFL. I've seen a lot of varying opinions on Nebraska. Some people think that they're still going to struggle in his first year. Jeff Sims coming over from Georgia Tech quarterback. He's got some talent, but he is turnover prone. Can he do better with more talent around him? I've seen people say that Nebraska could be maybe 8-4 at best if all goes well in year one. Where do you see Nebraska and Matt Rule's first season?
Now, before I go on my part of this, do we treat them like Colorado?
Mm-hmm.
Because Nebraska and Colorado are kind of one of the same, A lot of people have got the Matt Rule hype on that, he could possibly turn Nebraska into a New Year's 16. There's been that out there, which, like you mentioned, that might be a little too much right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's various opinions on it. Do we put them in dumpster fire? Are they almost a bowl? Do we think they'll make a bowl? Is it too soon to say they're top 25? Where are you leaning on this one? Because I'm kind of stumped.
I feel like Nebraska has more of a chance to be good in year one than Colorado, because Matt Rule is a more experienced coach than, Deion Sanders, despite the fact that he was at Jackson State and did a good job there. But like Matt Rule has had success before. But the key, though, is that it took him a year to turn around Baylor and Temple. It's not like he just did it. It took a year or two. So using that logic, Nebraska probably won't make a bowl game in year one. But then on the other hand, Nebraska has talent. And that's why the whole story of Nebraska was the best 3-9 team of all time, or the best 3-9 team at least that season, was because literally every single game Nebraska lost by 10 points or less. So it didn't matter who they played. They lost to Illinois by less than 10. They lost to Ohio State by less than 10. Every team they played, Michigan, they lost by less than 10. They lost to every single team that they lost to that year by less than 10. They were competitive against everyone. And you're not competitive against Michigan and Ohio State unless you've got talent. So Nebraska has talent. They still do. They still got a solid enough team. And now that you have Matt Rule, who a lot of people believe can really do, some special things, maybe that would result in some year one success. But to Troy V's point, not sure what to expect, being a new coach, first year head coach. And plus, a lot of people do have question marks on Jeff Sims and, how high of a ceiling he has. Even at Nebraska with more talent. I'm probably have to agree and say that Nebraska will be an almost bowl team like Colorado. I think that of the two, I'm more confident that Nebraska can get to 6 wins and make a bowl game than Colorado. But there are a lot of question marks, and it does usually take Matt Rule at least a year to, get his teams to where, further along to where they want to be. So I think that does make sense. Up next, though, we've got a team that I think that, you can put the whole program at this point in the dumpster fire. Unfortunately, Northwestern is not in good shape. I mean, even before the news that all this stuff had happened, Northwestern probably still would have been in dumpster fire. Because, Pat Fitzgerald did a fantastic job with Northwestern. He had those off years, and then he had good years. He had, like, the even years they were good, the off years they were bad, like, thing going on. But there's just not much else to say with Northwestern right now. They just do not have a lot of talent on the team. And it's going to be, even though they're in the West, it's going to be extremely hard for them to win games. Maybe you have a different opinion, but what's your thoughts on Northwestern?
Well, Jeffrey, back up. You know what we need to do, Jeffrey? Just back up the garbage truck and let's throw them in. Put them in the garbage. They don't even belong in the dumpster. They belong in the garbage truck.
Yeah,
Northwestern,
we could have put another tier, even worse dumpster fire.
exactly. We'll name it the Northwestern tier because it's bad. And like you said, it was bad before all this stuff happened, but now it's really bad. But maybe they can upset some people and keep Northwestern fans happy. But I doubt it.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it is not impossible. They could maybe win a couple games, but it would still, they'd still be in dumpster fire, unfortunately. Troy V definitely agrees. Up next, though, we've got definitely a friend of ours, Will, ND, Notre Dame's team. Notre Dame, every year, people, can they be a CFP contender? Are they a New Year's Six contender, just top 25 team, all that kind of stuff? Notre Dame has Sam Hartman now at quarterback, so they've got potentially an upgraded offense. A lot of people are still skeptical with Marcus Freeman. He needs more time, though, for that to be determined. Where do you see Notre Dame in 2023?
So for me, Notre Dame has got a really tough schedule. I mean, they got Pitt, NC State. They got my guys at Louisville. They got Ohio State, USC. Like, it's like a gauntlet, like one after the other after the other. Like, they better be glad that the first 3 weeks are going to be their cupcakes because after that, it's almost like throwing them into a bed of thumbtacks and just saying, let's hope you can survive it because it's rough. And with all that being said, I want to just put, I want to put Notre Dame in a bowl team. I know people are not going to, especially our good friend Will D, but I don't see them winning more than 8 games, even with Sam Hartman. What do you think, Jeffrey? Am I being too conservative, or what do you think?
It's close. Troy V says top 25 for Notre Dame, not quite CFP level and above bowl game level. I mean, if they go 8-4, like you said, you can't see them winning more than 8. If they win 8 games, they'll be ranked because it's Notre Dame. It's kind of like Texas. There's just some teams that if you go 8-4, you're going to be ranked. Notre Dame, Texas, teams like that. Alabama, if they somehow went 8-4, would be ranked still. I think that their schedule is extremely hard, but I don't think that they're going to have the hiccups they had last year, against, the Stanfords and the Marshalls. I think that they're going to, get that behind them. Sam Hartman won't allow, them to lose to teams like that. If he's healthy and he's playing well, there's no issue there. They beat Clemson last year. Granted, it was, at Notre Dame, but still, they have talent. They could, they could really perform at a high level and still lose 3 or 4 games, to your point, because of the schedule. They can be really solid and still lose. But I think they'll go 8-4, and if they go 8-4, I think that they'll squeak their way to being a top 25 team. I think this can be close. I mean, they definitely could be better if they could somehow, be able to upset a couple of the teams that they're probably not going to be favored to beat. And as long as they don't slip up, maybe like to Louisville, if they don't, then I think that they should be a top 25 team. I could see bowl team. It's close, to your point, Austin. I could definitely drop them, but to give Notre Dame some credit, I think Sam Hartman puts them over the top to get to 8 wins and be a top 25 team.
Oh,
Up
boy.
Next, we got North Carolina. This is interesting because Drake May, Heisman candidate, he's fantastic. The offense is great. They don't have Josh Downs, anymore. He's gone. And one of the receivers that North Carolina has brought in through the portal is ineligible to play, so that hurts. But I still think North Carolina's receiving core will be solid. I think the offense will be solid. The defense, though. The defense last year was borderline USC problematic. It was not good. The linebacking core was solid. Power Eccles, Cedric Gray. But outside of that, the defensive line had some trouble. The secondary got beat time and time again. AK Holiday Bowl against Oregon. They're getting beat on the entire time. I think the defense will be a bit better, but in a weird way, I almost feel like the offense will be a bit worse. I feel like the offense, even though Drake May is going to ball out, I feel like the talent around them on offense is a bit worse, and the defense might be a bit better. They were a top 25 team last season. They went like 9-4. I think that's about what they'll do again. I don't think they'll do much better or worse. That South Carolina game is going to be key, though. If they lose South Carolina, I could see them being 7-5 possibly. But I think that they could, win 8-9 games. It's going to be interesting, though. What are your thoughts on North Carolina for this season?
So, if you look at North Carolina's schedule, they could possibly open up 0-5. As crazy as that sounds, I know people thinking, how is that possible? Well, they open up with South Carolina. That's not a given. App State, scare some teams sometimes. I mean, Texas A&M, which we'll get to, they're still feeling the effects of that. That sent them into a downward spiral. And then they got Minnesota. I mean, North Carolina, if they start 0-5, oh my. What questions are going to be arose then? But I would say that the offense in North Carolina can do enough if the defense is at least, 50% improved. I think North Carolina is top 25, borderline New Year's 6, possibly.
Ooh.
Possibly.
Yes.
But it's
not impossible.
They may miss bowl eligibility altogether. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, they have a wild variance. I agree with you. I mean, if everything went wrong, 5-7 is not impossible. I would say that would be very unlikely, but it's not impossible because they have a lot of tricky games. But again, it feels about like the same team. It just feels like one side of the ball is a little better, one side of the ball might be a bit worse. And it's the ACC. Yes, there's some sneaky teams, and North Carolina usually slips up to 1 or 2. It's close between bowl and top 25, but I do think North Carolina will barely be a top 25 team. Just barely. It'll be close like Notre Dame, though. Probably be on the back end of the top 25. Up next, though, and real quick, Anthony Easton, he says Louisville's going to beat Notre Dame. So you've got a fan right there, Austin, right there. He's definitely high on Louisville beating Notre Dame. But up next, though, we've got a team that is probably pretty easy. It's another easy one. You've got Ohio State. I mean, they've been great for the last 10 years, consistently, the best team in the Big Ten until Michigan has thrown them the last few years. Not beating them, but Ohio State still even made the playoff last year by losing to Michigan. Do you think that they're automatically a CFP, or do you think that they could possibly slip up to New Year's 6?
I think CFP contender. I mean, there's not much to talk about on this one, even though some Ohio State fans want Ryan Day fired because he can't beat Michigan, but I think CFP contender is fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. Like if they went a 1-11 and beat Michigan, he wouldn't be fired. But then if they win every game and then lose to Michigan enough times, he's gone. It's insane. Like no, that wouldn't happen. He went 1-11, they fire him. But it's crazy though. Like that game is so important. Like you can't beat Michigan, but you make the playoff. It's still not enough. Like Ohio State, if they beat Georgia, they're winning it all. They were 1 point away, Marvin Harrison injury away, but losing to Michigan was still just unbearable. That's how heated that rivalry is.
But yeah, CFP contender for Ohio State. I mean, there's nothing else.
It's his favorite team as well. Ohio State is CFP champ. We'll go 15-0. Definitely, he is high on his team, and I will have to agree with both of you. I think Ohio State is definitely to move them all the way up here. Probably one of the last teams to be here. Could be the last team to be up here. But we've got Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Michigan, Ohio State in the CFP contenders. We've got some teams left for sure, but Ohio State we feel is in CFP contender. Up next, though, we got Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is an interesting team because Mike Gundy, to me, has been like Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. Very consistently 8-4. Maybe a little worse than Ferentz record-wise, but it's about the same. It's very consistent. But Oklahoma State, to me, was one of the most surprising transfers of the offseason. Spencer Sanders, transferred from Oklahoma State to Ole Miss. And it shocked me because Spencer Sanders was locked in despite his turnovers, because he has a lot of turnovers. I think he's got like 67 touchdowns, 40 picks in his career. And, that's a lot of picks. Very high on the interception. He's very turnover prone, but he can put up a lot of yards. He threw for 400 yards a lot at Oklahoma State. But he was locked in as the starter with the Cowboys. He goes to Ole Miss where he's not even guaranteed to start. He's in a battle with Jackson Dart, who was the starting quarterback last year for Ole Miss. So we'll see if Sanders can win the job. But whether Sanders wins the job at Ole Miss or not, it doesn't help the fact that Oklahoma State doesn't have Spencer Sanders. And their offense could take a step back. Granted, it's hard to imagine Oklahoma State not being a bowl team because Mike Gundy consistently has Oklahoma State making a bowl every single year, no matter what. But without Spencer Sanders, it's interesting. Oklahoma State could have some struggles. Where do you see the Cowboys in 2023?
So for me, looking at last year going into this year, they started off really well. A lot of people were considering them a dark horse, college football playoff team. Everyone thought that would be them instead of TCU. But then that magical ride happened. TCU, the whole story, which we'll get to them. But for Oklahoma State, the way they collapsed, that's very concerning. Barely scraping bowl eligibility. I agree with you, Jeffrey. It's hard to see them in a world where they're not a bowl team, but I can almost put them in the same category as Arizona, Michigan State, Nebraska, almost bowl team. But for right now, I'm going to say they're still a bowl team. Which way are you leaning on this one?
Yeah, I'm with you. To me, it is very close, kind of like Mississippi State. But I mean, their situation is different because obviously new coach and new style, and we just don't know how they're going to react, perform off of that. And that's why we put them in almost bowl team. With Oklahoma State, you're dealing with Gundy, where he has been there forever and he gets them to bowl games no matter what. Usually a lot of question marks, but I think that they'll find a way to get to 6 wins by the skin of their teeth, but it's definitely not going to be as good of a season as they've had in the past. And I could see them not making a bowl game for sure. Up next, though, their rival, and the last year they're going to be playing as, conference opponents, because Oklahoma's going to the SEC. Oklahoma's up next, and they're a team that for a while was a CFP contender, New Year's Six contender every year. They were in that top tier. They never really cracked the Bama, Georgia, Clemson level, good, the LSU 2019 team level good, but Oklahoma was always there. They were just a defense away, kind of like how USC is right now. A defense away, ironically, because Lincoln Riley was the head coach of both. But still, Oklahoma's taking a step back. They were not as good last year. In Brent Venables' first season, they lost a lot of talent. And that's not his fault, really, because some of that talent went and followed Lincoln Riley, some went to other programs. Dylan Gabriel put up yards. But to be fair, I will give credit a little bit to Oklahoma in the fact that Dylan Gabriel missed some time, and that time that he missed, they were bad. They were horrible. They were losing games left and right. They would probably have been better than what they were last year if he played all season. So he's back. Oklahoma talent-wise is a top 25 team. That's why they're ranked to start the season. They're a top 25 team based on talent. But do you think that they'll finish in the top 25, or where do you have Oklahoma in 2023?
So if Brent Venables, Lincoln Riley, plucked a lot of the talent and then left Brent Venables with almost nothing in the cupboard, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Lincoln Riley filled it up with some nice Campbell soup. We had chicken and stars. We had beef stew. It was nice. And then he was left with the rotten baked beans and the tomato soup. But now he's replenished it. He's got the beautiful soups back. I could see Oklahoma top 25. I could see their 6 if things fall their way, just because of who they are. But I'm going to say top 25 to stay safe. New Year's 6 could be another year away, especially with their defense. They're like USC. Defense could be very suspect at times. Where are you leaning on this, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that the talent of Oklahoma and the pedigree has them here, New Year's Six. But Lincoln Riley's gone. Brent Venables again. It was a struggling first season. They got more talent now back through the portal, but I think that they'll be top 25. They'll finish in the top 25, and it's possible that they could be New Year's Six, and it's not impossible, but it would be a substantial step forward for them to get there, and again, it's not impossible. They could get it done because they have the talent to do so. The Big 12, a lot of this depends on K-State, TCU. How do these teams do? If these teams do not perform like they did last season, I think Oklahoma could get there because we don't have a Big 12 team right now in New Year's Six. And somebody's going to be there, to be fair. Someone is going to be there, more than likely. So it's interesting, but Oklahoma, K-State, Texas, they're all fringe. They could get there. Texas and Oklahoma have more talent than K-State. K-State did it last year. It's going to be interesting, but right now I would put Oklahoma in top 25 just because there's a little bit too much uncertainty overall on how much of a jump they'll make. Ole Miss is up next, and I've seen a lot of people say that Ole Miss should not even be ranked to start the season. They're not going to finish the season ranked, but Ole Miss has, again, as I've already mentioned with Spencer Sanders transferring from Oklahoma State, they've got two quarterbacks that are capable. Jackson Dart was solid last season for Ole Miss. I would argue the only thing that Jackson Dart did not do well enough last season is that maybe he didn't take enough risks or, he didn't maybe put up enough yards, but he can run. He's got legs, and he didn't make too many mistakes. I think he only had like 8 picks last year, but he only had like 17 touchdowns. So it's not like he was putting up like 30 touchdowns and 8 picks. There weren't really enough touchdowns, but Spencer Sanders the opposite. Spencer Sanders gives you more touchdowns, but he gives you a lot more picks. Very turnover prone. Average like over 2 picks a game at Oklahoma State, around 3.5, 4 touchdowns a game. So they haven't named a starter. It could be Jackson Dart again, like last season. It could be Spencer Sanders. I think both quarterbacks give them a chance for success. Quinshon Judkins is a breakout candidate to do way better than he did last year. He was a really good running back in his freshman season for Ole Miss, but he could be a lot better this season. He could take a massive step forward. They got Zachary Franklin from UTSA, who was Frank Harris's top wideout with the Roadrunners. That's a massive loss for UTSA. I think they'll still be solid, but they're not going to be as good because Zachary Franklin was a lot of that offense. Frank Harris targeted him all the time. So that's big for Ole Miss. They got Caden Prescorn. He's a good tight end. He got through the portal as well. I think overall, like, the offense is pretty solid. But whoever's the quarterback, Spencer Sanders or Jackson Dart, their ceiling's going to limit Ole Miss. The defense, I think, for Ole Miss is going to be solid. It's not going to be great. It's not going to, bail them out of a lot of games. Their offense strong. But the quarterback play is key. I think Ole Miss, again, being in the tough SEC West, they have a ceiling. There's not much better than they can do than like 9-3. I think they could maybe go 9-3 at best. But there's a lot of, variety of results they could possibly do. They have an extremely tough schedule. Where do you see Ole Miss finishing in 2023?
So Ole Miss is a team that gets hot. They get cold. I think Ole Miss, for me, is borderline top 25 to bowl team. I think New Year's Six, that means they would have to run the gauntlet of the SEC West. That means LSU, Bama, A&M. They'd have to run the gauntlet of that. And if they do, they deserve all the credit in the world, and they deserve a New Year's Six shot, maybe even playoff if they somehow. But realistically, top 25 bowl team. Where do you see them, Jeffrey?
It's close. It's another one of those like Notre Dame and North Carolina for me. There's a lot of these where it's like I could put them in both, and it wouldn't. I could see it. It's not crazy because Ole Miss, if they go 7-5, they're not going to finish ranked. Unless they like blow out their team in the bowl game, maybe they backdoor at 8-5, but probably not. But you never know. But I think that like for Ole Miss, I think I feel 8-4 is within. Because there's a lot of talent on that offense. Just Cade Prescorn, Zachary Franklin, and Quinshon Judkins alone is going to help out. whoever's the QB. The QB just has to play well. I think Jackson Dart, plays more mistake free, could maybe help Ole Miss do better. But Sanders, if he gets hot, Sanders is really good. So it's gonna be interesting. I think that Ole Miss will finish 8-4 more than likely. I think that they have enough talent, but it's gonna be hard to do that. But if they do finish 8-4, they will finish in the top 25. So I'm gonna put them in top 25. But again, like with Notre Dame and North Carolina, it's by the skin of their teeth. Up next, we have Oregon. And we're getting to the top of the Pac-12 teams here. Oregon's a team that a lot of people think could, be New Year's Six. They're probably top 25. They're ranked right now, obviously, the preseason. Bo Nix is back, which helps. One of the top returning quarterbacks in college football. That helps big time. Where do you see Oregon in 2023?
So for me, personally, Bo Nix, he's one that, has a lot of Heisman hype. Can he do this? Can he be this? Can he lead Oregon to the promised land? I think Oregon is there for sure. I think a New Year's Six. I think they belong with USC and LSU as a New Year's Six. Are they a CFP contender? Very possible. Very, very possible. Especially with that schedule. They do have a lot of tough games on there. But I'm going to say they're in a New Year's Six. I think they're safely in New Year's Six. 9-3, 10-2. I think for me that's the ceiling for Oregon. I would say New Year's Six. What do you think, Jeffrey? Do you have them maybe going to the playoffs possibly, or you New Year's Six? What is your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Oregon is a team that has talent. I feel like I say that with a lot of these teams, but there's a lot of talent all over college football. But Oregon is a team that has talent, and they get players in. Oregon historically, at least last 10, 15 years, Chip Kelly, Mara Cristobal eras, they got really good players. They got really good teams, and they were good last year. They're a couple of games shy of being even better than they were. They were really close. I mean, they finished and went to the Holiday Bowl, played North Carolina. So that's obviously not New Year's Six. But since Bo Nix is back, he's a year older, maybe. It's not impossible, but it just feels like the Pac-12 is in a situation where it could do the exact same thing it did last season, and they beat each other up. A lot of the teams just did. They just accumulated 3 or 4 losses out of nowhere because you're playing Utah, Washington, USC. It's just a lot of teams. Oregon, if they lose 3 games, they're probably not making a New Year's Six. If they lose 2 games, they will probably. But it depends on how it shakes out because usually, the Pac-12 gets the Rose Bowl. And if a team if USC makes the CFP, just say they did, like we were borderline, we put them in New Year's Six, then the next team makes the Rose Bowl. But if, USC doesn't, then the top team makes the Rose Bowl, so it's only one team. So it kind of depends on that. I for the sake of this, we're talking about teams that, how good that they actually are. I will honor what you said and have Oregon in New Year's Six because they have the talent. And I think they could do it, but a lot of that's going to hinge on actually what the other teams in the Pac-12 do and what USC does. Because if USC doesn't make the CFP, it makes Oregon's chance of making the New Year's Six almost impossible. But they have the talent to get it done. They're definitely going to be a top 25 team, like a lot of the other teams that are going to be from the Pac-12 are. But it's going to be close between the top 25 and New Year's Six based on what happens. Up next, though, we've got the rival of Oregon, the Beavers. Connor Johnson, Clint Moses, don't see them in chat, but definitely they are avid Oregon State fans, and they're going to be eager to find out where we have the Beavers. Oregon State, they've got DJ Uiagalelei, and that's big because he's got all the talent in the world, and he realized it for very brief at Clemson in that 2-game stretch with Boston College and then Notre Dame when Trevor Lawrence missed those 2 games that year. But then the next season when the offense became his, he just never found his footing. He's out the door. I think he'll help out Oregon State's quarterback room because Oregon State's quarterback room has been struggling the last couple seasons, but they found ways to win despite the limitations at QB. Their defense is scrappy, and they find ways on offense to, get enough yards on the ground and all that to win. With DJ, they could be even better, but still going to be tough with all those tough teams in the Pac-12. Where do you see Oregon State finishing on the tier list in 2023?
So I see Oregon State as top 25, I think. I think New Year's 6 is pushing it for now because, like you said, there's a lot of talented teams in the Pac-12, and somebody's got to lose somewhere. Mm-hmm. It's the unfortunate thing. I think Oregon State's going to kind of be that punching bag. Mm-hmm. I could see 3 or 4 losses coming their way. I know the Beavers fans out there are not going to like to hear that, but we have to face reality. Someone's got to be the punching bag. Someone's got to be. And I think Oregon State's going to be a big one. So I say top 25 team, though. I feel like if they win half their games, they'll get some respect.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be good. I think they're going to compete, and maybe they'll even knock off one of the big teams in the Pac-12. I mean, they're way better than they were before. Jonathan Smith's done a great job as head coach. But like you said, the teams are going to beat each other up, and it just feels like Oregon State, it's going to be too tough for them to get to New Year's 6. I think they'll finish, possibly 3-4 losses, like you said, and be a top 25 team for sure. Going to be really solid, and how DJ plays is going to make a big difference on how good that they're going to be. Up next is Penn State. And Penn State is a team that, a lot of people, even in our chat tonight, has been saying could beat Michigan. Maybe even could beat Ohio State if things broke their way. They got talent. Drew Ayler, a lot of this hinges on him because 5-star quarterback. Sean Clifford, a lot of people were up and down on him and mixed opinions on him. A lot of people liked his experience, but other people didn't like the fact that he was a bit turnover prone and he made mistakes at key moments of games. Drew Ayler could be better because he's got a lot of talent, but this is his first season where he's taking over. How will he be able to handle all that pressure in these big moments in his first year of having to do it? Penn State's got talent. Another team that I'm saying has a lot of talent because they do. They get players. They've got good defensive players. They got good offensive players. But Drew Ayler's play at quarterback is going to be a big key in helping James Franklin maybe get over the top and beating these teams this year. Where do you see Penn State finishing on the tier list in 2023?
So I think Penn State's a New Year's 6 team. The question is, do we want to put them in CFP contender? Do we think that they're going to take that next jump? That's the key thing because we have Ohio State, Michigan there. Do we want to say Penn State can make that jump? Or do we want to say they're solidly New Year's 6? Because top 25, of course they're going to be there. The question is, they just going to be our New Year's 6, or are we thinking they could jump to the contender status, maybe even compete for a natty? What do you think, Jeffrey?
Yeah, and that's a big reason why, I put Oregon in the contender, the New Year's 6 contender, because that's what it means, contender. Because, if USC, like I said, if they're up here, Oregon could be here. If USC's down here, Oregon falls. But contender means that they're in competition for it. So you could theoretically have Penn State and CFP contender, and it wouldn't be wrong, especially if they're this close. If they, they don't make the playoff, but they were that close and they had the team that was talented enough to do it. That's why contender is contender. It doesn't mean you even make it because we already have 5 teams. There's only 4 spots, and we already have Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Michigan, Ohio State. One of those teams isn't getting there. If it's down to those 5 teams, one of those teams is not getting in. So the one team that was still a contender was just that close. So that's what contender means. That's why you have more teams in the spots. So that's why Oregon goes into your 6. If you think that Penn State's team is good enough to be a CFP contender, we can put them there and have those 3 Big Ten teams. And it'd be okay, even if Penn State at the end of the day doesn't make it. For me, though, it's tough because Penn State is a team that just consistently doesn't get there, though. James Franklin, people talk about it. The top games can't get it done. It's just, to me, if Drew Ayler had more experience, as the starting quarterback, and I know that doesn't always matter because sometimes guys can just burst on the scene like Kansas State. We didn't even know who Will Howard was before last year. He just came in and played well. But Drew Ayler could come in and just ball out and maybe beat Michigan. Somehow all those teams have one loss, some crazy result where You never know. It could get crazy. But it's close. Like, I could go either way. I could put him in Year 6. I could put him in CFP. It's very close. What do you want to put him in?
Let's keep them in college football contender. Let's be a little spicy with it. Let's be a little spicy.
It's crazy. I'm okay with that. It's very close. I mean, they're definitely. I would have all these teams ahead. I mean, if you wanted to put them in order, I mean, you could probably do it like this. I guess you would put Michigan ahead. Haven't really put any of these in order, but it'd be like that. Penn State would be that last one, like it's fringe. But okay, we can leave them at CFP, but it's definitely by the skin of the Nittany Lions teeth. Pitt's up next. And Pitt's a team that, you talk about Pat Narduzzi, he's had success. He's gotten Pitt to a lot of 8-4 seasons. But Kenny Pickett's gone. Keith Slovis last year was okay. He did solid, but he transferred to BYU. Pittsburgh, I'm not seeing a lot of hype for them. I've seen some people say they could be good. I think they're in the other team vote start the season. So, I mean, a lot of people are thinking they're probably going to be 7-5, 8-4. What do you see Pitt in 2023?
So, for Pitt, it's very interesting. Looking at what we have left of teams, trying to figure out some of these because we're getting to the point now where it could get a little crowded in some of these places. And seeing the team got on deck, there's some spots that are more than likely going to be filled. I think Pitt, for me personally, I say they're a bowl team to top 25 because they're always really good at home. They're tough in front of their crowd. But when they go on the road, it's 50-50. I'm okay with putting them in just bowl team if you feel top 25, considering they're in the ACC is pushing it. But if you feel like they have the potential to be top 25, we can let that roll too. Be a little spicy with it.
I mean, they're in the ACC, and again, that helps and hurts teams because you talk about the fact that if you go 8-4, it's easy to go 8-4 in the ACC if you're decent, like Duke. Duke last year went 8-4, and they were solid. But were they as good as an 8-4 team in the Big Ten or the SEC? Of course not. But they were solid. They got to 8-4. But they weren't ranked because it's harder to rank an ACC team at 8-4 because of the strength of schedule is weaker. If Pitt goes 8-4, they're not probably going to be ranked. They'll probably be 9-3 to do that. I could see it, but I just think there's too many question marks. They don't have, really a lot of stability at a lot of key positions. They don't have, like I said, Pickett anymore. It's not like that. So, I mean, they could, based off the ACC, get to here, but I would put them in bowl teams for now. Like you said, it's getting crowded, but there's a lot of bowl teams. I mean, there's a lot of bowls, and a lot of these teams are going to make bowl games. So definitely, I think Pitt will make it. Up next is really interesting team because you talk about Pitt, like you said, they're a team that has that consistent coach. They usually make it, and that's why, we feel like they'll make a bowl, maybe even borderline top 25. But next, you've got Purdue, and Jeff Brom's gone to Louisville. Purdue's got a new coach. Yes, Hudson Card transferred from Texas. He was solid when he played, so that's why I think a lot of people are thinking Purdue can still be good. But they don't have Aiden O'Connell anymore. They don't have David Bell anymore. There's a lot gone. There's a lot of talent gone at Purdue, and I think that Ron Walters, the new head coach, has brought in some talent through the portal. Like I said, that he got Hudson Card, but I don't know. And they are on the West, and that's what makes this tough because if Purdue is in the Big Ten East, I probably wouldn't consider them for a bowl. But they're in the West. They got the easier schedule. Where do you see Purdue in 2023? You think they'll make a bowl game in Ron Walters' first season? You think they'll fall short?
So I'm glad you brought that up because if they were in the not the SEC on the brain, the Big Ten, if they were in the Big Ten East, it would be like we can almost consider them for dumpster fire. But since they're in the West, it kind of makes me want to say that they could possibly, for me, they're fringe almost a bowl team to a bowl team. They're really hard to figure out. And Hudson Card, is he the guy? Is he not? We've been spicy tonight. We've been conservative. Purdue, I feel like Purdue, if for my vote, I would say almost a bowl team. What do you think, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I think that because it's his first season, and you talk about even the West. I mean, you've got some solid teams like Iowa, Wisconsin, maybe Nebraska will improve, Minnesota. There's just a lot of teams that it just doesn't really feel like Purdue has an advantage, and they could win those games, possibly. Brock, he says, Troy, they have quarterback play. They don't have a seeded trial this year. He's talking about with Ohio State going 15-0, but Brock says almost a bowl. I would have to agree. I think that Purdue, they could make a bowl. It's not impossible because they're in the West, but I think that they'll fall a little short. I think they'll be almost a bowl team. Next, we got Rutgers, another Big Ten team. And Rutgers, obviously, they're in the East. And Greg Schiano, when he was coaching Rutgers back in the day, when they were in the Big East, he was getting Rutgers to bowl games. He was getting Rutgers to 8-4 seasons, some top 25 finishes and all that. Rarely, but it was not out of the cards. Well, now he's back at Rutgers, and a lot of Rutgers fans are still confident, and I don't really think a lot of people are saying he should be fired, anything like that yet. He's doing better than what Chris Ash was doing at Rutgers, but Rutgers doesn't really seem to be getting better either. Rutgers just kind of feels like they're just stalled. Like they had that one year where they won a couple non-con games, and it was looking like they were going to do some damage, and they almost beat Michigan, but then Michigan switched quarterbacks, and then Rutgers fell apart in that game and lost. It just feels like Rutgers just can't get really anywhere other than 4-8, 5-7. That's their ceiling, and it feels like that's their ceiling again. And I don't know if that qualifies as dumpster fire because they can't get better, or just the team is just in such a tough division that they just can't do better, and they're actually a better team than they're given credit for because they play such a tough schedule. I don't really know. All I know is it's gonna be tough for Rutgers to make a bowl game. I don't know if they completely are a dumpster fire either. But what are your thoughts on Rutgers?
So Rutgers is very interesting. Like you said, they're very interesting since they're in the Big Ten East. They got to play the gauntlet. They got to play the three best a lot of times. I want to say that they're almost a bowl team, but you can make an argument to put them in dumpster fire. You could say open up the dumpster and throw them in. I'm torn on this one. I want to have a little confidence that they could go 5-7, 7 and be almost a bowl team, 4-8. But part of me also thinks too that, like you said, they have been better. That just fire up the dumpster, throw them in, and never look back. But what do you think, Jeffrey? We need some expert opinions here.
Brock says dumpster fire team, and I mean, I get that because of the fact that they don't win. And you just look at Rutgers and they just look bad. But, I mean, Rutgers is not what they were a few seasons ago. I mean, if this was 4 years ago, we'd be clearly putting Rutgers in dumpster fire. I remember one game where they were playing like Michigan State or Indiana or something where their quarterback threw for like 2 yards in the entire game. I mean, that was Rutgers' offense. Like, they couldn't do anything. They were one of the worst teams in college football. Like, they were losing to, MAC schools and stuff. It was bad. Rutgers is better, and they're even getting like some 4-star recruits rarely. But they've got. I think that even their quarterback was a former 4-star recruit, Gavin Wimsatt, but he hasn't really developed. Like he's been there for like 2 years, and he just is not really getting much better. Like he could get better. Maybe this is his year. And they had a couple good receivers a couple years ago, but I think they're gone now. I think they've already, gone for like Bo Melton and stuff. And then you talk about, looking at, they have Johnny Langan, who's like a tight end that they use, kind of like Taysom Hill with the Saints. It's interesting. Their defense is sometimes not bad. It's close. I mean, they're not awful. They're not what they were. But, I mean, they're just not great either. I mean, it's close, but I kind of feel like they're not getting much better. And I feel like this season they'll be like 3 or 4 wins. I'll put them at the top of dumpster fire. They're either the bottom of almost bowl teams or they're the top of dumpster fire. They're not awful, but they're not really improving, and the fact that they've been stagnant for the last 3 years is kind of rough. Even though in their defense, it's really hard to get better in the Big Ten East. They're not awful, but it is what it is for Rutgers. So up next, we've got a team that if we were doing this list 7, 8 years ago, they'd be at the top of the list. They'd be New Year's 6. They'd be top 25, all that kind of stuff. Stanford. Stanford's fallen from grace. Yeah, that's obvious. Stanford's nowhere where they used to be. They, finally David Shaw called it quits. He's out. And it's not really fair to blame, the new coach for this season. They're not going to probably perform well. They lost, like, you look up and down college football teams' rosters, and there's a bunch of Stanford transfers. Like, a lot of Stanford transfers. Players leaving the Cardinal. It's bad. Yes, the Pac-12 is not the toughest conference in college football, but this is the last season of it being the way that it is, and there's a lot of good teams in the Pac-12. Stanford's going to have a hard time beating almost anybody in the league. It's going to be difficult. Even probably Colorado at this point because of the talent alone. Again, it's going to be extremely tough for Stanford to win. But what are your thoughts on Stanford?
So, I think Stanford. We've been nice to a lot of teams, but Stanford's kind of one of those. What you get is what you see. They're not going to be very good. Back up the dumpster, throw them in. Unless you have faith that possibly they could be almost a bowl team. Do you have that kind of faith, Jeffrey, or are you with me? Kind of just going and throw them in.
I just don't see much. I mean, they didn't bring in a ton of talent through the portal. It's hard to do that at Stanford anyway because they're an academic institution. They're all academic institutions as well, but they're high academic institution. There's a lot of, high IQ individuals at Stanford. It's very difficult for some, type talents to go to Stanford. It's just difficult. Their recruiting is out of this world. They were doing it in the past. They were getting good players. It's just not anymore for whatever reason. Just NIL, the portal, everything is just working against Stanford. First year head coach. I just don't see them going really much better than 3-9, and that unfortunately is a dumpster fire. Even though, it's not really their fault at this point. But even if it's not their fault, it is what it is. They're just not probably going to be that good. So up next, we got South Carolina. The Gamecocks are a team that is getting better. Shane Beamer, son of Frank Beamer, that was a long-time great coach at Virginia Tech. Shane Beamer's doing a good job at South Carolina. He's getting them a lot of success. He's getting talent in. Spencer Rattler, a lot of people are up and down on him, but he can play. He can have good games, particularly the game against Tennessee where he threw for a lot of yards. I feel like South Carolina, and Brock says it right here. South Carolina, I think, is going to take a step forward this year. They brought in guys from the transport. I also think Spencer Rattler the year on his belt with Shane Beamer. Spencer Rattler can play. Again, he's turnover prone, but he can play. And Beamer is energetic. He has that program with a lot of optimism. And yes, like you said, Brock, tons of portal talents going to South Carolina. Things are possibly looking up for them. Where do you have South Carolina in 2023? And keep in mind, they are on the SCs, which helps.
Yeah, so for me, South Carolina is a borderline top 25 New Year's 6 discussion for me.
Ooh.
Possibly. If Spencer Rattler can stay healthy and not turn the ball over and he can play the Heisman level, we could possibly see them buying for a New Year's 6 bid. But I think they're solidly, for me right now, a top 25 team just for the fact they are in the SEC, and it just means more, as they say. That's my take on it. I feel like top 25, borderline New Year's 6. What do you think?
It's interesting because I could see all three. I can see them being a bowl team. They're going to be a bowl team. I can see them being good enough to be a top 25. And I could see a crazy world where they're like that Kentucky, sometimes Tennessee, type representative out of the East where they're like behind Georgia, and they could like to Brock's point, he says he's got them going 9-3 or 10-2. They could go 10-2, be New Year's Six. They could. It's going to be tough, though. I think that it's more likely they go 8-4, 9-3, and that would put them in the top 25. I could see New Year's Six. It's not impossible. They definitely could be here, but I would put them in top 25. I think that they'll definitely be a solid team. They'll definitely be, a team that a lot of Gamecock fans can be proud of, because there's been a lot of seasons where South Carolina has struggled recently, since, Steve Spurrier was the coach. After that, he was really great, but then after that, they had some struggles, but I think they'll be a lot better. Syracuse is up next. The Orange are interesting because they made a bowl game last year, but they started the season off great, and then they just collapsed. And I don't really know what to make of Syracuse, because, I remember when they won a lot of those games early in the season last year, and people were buying into the Syracuse hype. And I was like, well, they barely won these games. And I know that a win is a win, but it just never really looked like Syracuse actually was ever that good. They just found ways to beat teams that were kind of on their level, maybe a little bit better. But then when they started playing teams later in the season, and yes, Garrett Schrader, to be fair, did get hurt the midway of the season, and their backup quarterback just was not getting the job done. But Garrett Schrader, he's back, but I still he has a limit, because he can run, but running gets you injured. And he can pass, but he uses legs to help his passing game. I don't know. I just feel like Syracuse is just not – they're not going to be great, but the ACC allows them to make a bowl. They could get to 6 wins, because teams that aren't great in the ACC get to 6 wins. Syracuse could make a bowl game because of that fact. But their talent's just not great on paper. And if they were in the SEC, they'd be a dumpster fire probably. But where do you see Syracuse in 2023?
So for me, Syracuse, I have them as a bowl team right now. But like you said, the big point was they started the season off 6-0. If you remember, they were bowl eligibility within the first 6 weeks. And everyone's like, oh, Syracuse may be like the Cincinnati, and they might make the CFP, and things are gonna change for their luck. And Dino Babers is our guy. And then after the Clemson game, then they just got whipped all up and down the field, like a country whipping mule. But I think they're a bowl team. But you could see a world where you could put them at almost a bowl team because of their talent on paper, like you mentioned. But for right now, I say you could throw them in bowl team. I think for right now, I think they can get it done.
And to Brock's point, Syracuse had Clemson on the ropes last year, and I would make an argument they should have won that game. Syracuse, to me, it's like A&M and Alabama. A&M has some bad games, but every time they play Alabama, they give it 110%. Syracuse struggles against teams that they should win or should be more competitive with, and then they lose. But when they play Clemson, it's like they throw all they got, and they play as hard as they can, and they always play Clemson usually tough. But again, Garrett Schrader's injury made a difference. He got hurt, and that's why Syracuse declined. I think that if he hadn't got hurt, they could have gone 8-4, possibly. But that wouldn't have put him as a top 25 team anyway, because, again, the ACC, not enough tough teams to, make the AP voters rank you. I'll put, as long as Schrader stays healthy, I think Syracuse can get to 6. Because they're in the ACC. If they were in the Pac-12 or the Big Ten or the SEC, I would say that they would not make a bowl with the same team. Because they're in the ACC, I think they can get it done. But Schrader has to stay healthy. If he does not, if he gets hurt before they're bowl eligible, they're not going to make a bowl. Brock says Syracuse bowl eligible, for sure. I think it's possible. Definitely they can get it done. Now we're on to the T teams. TCU. The Horned Frogs, great story last year, made the playoffs, beat Michigan. The national championship game. If you're a Horned Frog fan, you don't even think about it. It doesn't exist in your mind how bad it was. But TCU was still a great story. Beating Michigan was still just, it was good enough for the expectation. No one was expecting TCU to do that. But now Max Duggan's gone. Condre Miller's gone. Quentin Johnson's gone. that trio itself is just insane. That's a lot of production that's just gone. And there's more than that. It's not just those three. They got some defensive players that are gone. They've brought some guys in. JoJo Earl transferred from Alabama to TCU. They've brought some guys in. It's not like that TCU had success this season with these guys and then no players are transferred in because, like, oh, well, they'll take a step back. No, a lot of players are believing in TCU. And that's good. That's really, really good. The problem, though, as well, is that Garrett Riley left for Clemson. That hurts. Offensive coordinator Garrett Riley leaving is just awful. And to Brock's point, Trey Sanders also. Can't forget Trey Sanders. That's a great point. So the two Alabama guys, JoJo Earl and Trey Sanders. Trey Sanders has to stay healthy, though. If he doesn't stay healthy, then because he was one of the top running back recruits, a few years ago, but he just has not been able to stay healthy. There's been a lot of issues there. But if he stays healthy, he could be great. But yes. So TCU has some talent coming in, but is it going to be as good as it was, the talent that they had this past season? Garrett Riley gone, how's their offense going to do? I could see TCU all over the place. Where do you see TCU in 2023?
So this goes back to our point of the Big 12. More than likely, someone from the Big 12 is going to be a New Year's 16. More than likely. Is TCU New Year's 16? I know a lot of talent was lost. But there's a lot of people that believe that Sonny Dykes is the guy, that he's going to be able to take them to the promised land, that he's going to keep this going. But this wasn't a one-hit wonder. This wasn't a fluke. For me, I want to say, just because we haven't thrown a Big 12 team in there, I want to say, could you put them in New Year's 6 contender possibly? But they're also borderline top 5. Like you said, they could also be borderline just a bowl team. And they could even possibly be almost a bowl team if things do not break their way whatsoever and injuries happen, which suck. What do you think, Jeffrey?
Yeah, there's a lot of variance here. And what makes it harder, it's almost like the Pac-12 where there's just a lot of teams beating up on each other. I mean, like you said, we've got all these teams from the Big 12 that are close. Texas, K-State, Oklahoma, in the top 25 teams. Those are teams that TCU is going to have to beat if they're going to be New Year's 6. I think that they're going to be worse. There's no way that they're going to be as good as last year. I don't think they'll be New Year's 6. Could they finish top 25? Yes. 4 Big 12 teams can finish top 25. Now, obviously, we've got some more teams left from the Big 12. But I think that 4 teams can finish from the Big 12 in the top 25. And TCU could be that 4th team. It could be K-State, Texas, Oklahoma, and it could be TCU. It's so close. I'm very torn between just putting them bowl eligible or top 25. As Brock said, Trey Sanders definitely is injury prone. Brock says TCU's not making it this year. I'm sorry, bowl eligible for me. And then he said they are top 25, though it's an argument there. So again, he agrees as well. It's close. It's very, very close. It just depends on JoJo Earl. It depends on Trey Sanders. It depends on some of those guys they brought. It depends on the quarterback play, all of that. The new offensive coordinator, no longer Garrett Riley, all that. Can they just be respectable? Because they're going to be worse, but it's about not completely falling off a cliff and going like 6-6. That would just be a horrible step. Kind of like how LSU did when they won it all with Joe Burrow, and then they just fell off the map the next year, and Edo got fired and all that stuff. Like, that's the thing. Will TCU have that type of drop, or will it just be a moderate drop to like 8-4-9-3? It's tough because I could see them going 8-4-9-3 or 6-6, 7-5. I don't know. It's close. I mean, to put a bow on it, I mean, it's very close between the two.
I say put them in bowl teams, because top 25, down to the nitty gritty, and we need to start preserving some spots because there's a couple of teams that you can make an argument over TCU coming up.
Yeah, it's interesting. It stinks to put them that low, especially the season they had last year. And they could be a top 25 team, but it's definitely going to be hard for them to do that. Up next, you got Tennessee. Tennessee's a team that I feel like a lot of people are a bit varied on because there's a lot of believers in Joe Milton and what he did in the Clemson game. And I think that if Joe Milton plays well, then Tennessee could be a New Year's Six team. I don't know about CFP. I think that's a stretch. I mean, it's not impossible. Like if someone said Tennessee could be a CFP contender, I mean, I would say that they're not, grasping at straws. It's not impossible. But I feel like New Year's Six is their ceiling. I don't think they can go higher than that. I mean, they're probably going to be top 25. But it's like Brock said right here. Great point. Tennessee 9-3. They lost Hooker and Hyatt. I don't see Joe Milton not throwing interceptions. Hooker was a really good part of Tennessee's success last year. I mean, if they're going 9-3, they're not making a New Year's Six, and that's kind of where I'm at. I feel like Tennessee is either going to be 9-3 or 10-2. It's either or, and there's only so many spots for New Year's Six, but I could see both. I could see them being New Year's Six. They're in the East, and that helps. That definitely helps. It's not as hard as the West. But Hyatt being gone, Tillman being gone, that's tough. And the defense for Tennessee, it's like North Carolina where it can be bad. The Tennessee defense, I mean, they gave up 63 to Rattler in South Carolina. Because everyone talked about how Hooker going down was the reason they lost. And it's not why they lost. The defense is why they lost. Hooker was just the icing on the cake because it gave them no chance because their offense was gone after that. But I don't know. I could see 10 wins. What do you think on Tennessee? It's tough.
So for me, I am thinking if they can beat Georgia and Alabama, you can make an argument to throw them in CFP contender.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the key. Can they beat both of them? Presuming they go 1-1, I say we throw them in the New Year's Six. I think that's fair and that's right. I think New Year's Six, especially since there's not many teams there, I think Tennessee has the talent and quality to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I think New Year's Six is where they belong for right now.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I think that on paper, the talent's there, and overall because they built up talent, especially on offense. The defense, like they're losing a lot of talent, but there's still a lot of talent there. And I think they'll be New Year's Six. It's going to be close. I could see them not being a New Year's Six contender, but I think that they'll find a way to be really, really close. Yeah, Brock says, well, Tennessee doesn't beat Bama if Alabama doesn't make all those mental mistakes. I 100% agree with that. I agree with that for sure. I mean, Alabama did make a lot of mistakes. That was a great game, though. And then Brock said, don't forget they lost the first-round offensive line. I think they got a weakness on the offensive line this year. Yeah, that's true as well. I mean, there's question marks with Tennessee. I mean, like Austin said, we don't really have a lot of New Year's Six contenders. I mean, we've got 6 teams in the CFP, which only 4 are going to make it. And then we've got, so basically 6 New Year's Six contenders, and you're going to have about 7 or 8 of them. So, I mean, somebody's got to go. I mean, you can move Texas and put Tennessee down, but I think Tennessee is fringe. It could go either way. But I definitely see your point, Brock. They could be lower. Up next, we have one of the most polarizing football teams in college football, Texas A&M, because talent alone, especially last year, was insane. They had top 5 recruiting classes every single year, and then it culminated with, granted, they were all freshmen, but it culminated with the number 1 recruiting class over Alabama, and A&M did not perform. And there was a lot of problems. And a lot of people talked about the locker room, all that kind of stuff. Not going to get into all that kind of stuff. But still, A&M had a lot going for them, but they just did not win. The problem with A&M is that they lose a lot of talent every year because of the fact that these players don't stay. Like, there's a lot of players that have transferred from Texas A&M to other programs, but A&M has brought talent back in. They get talent back in. It's just the way A&M is. They're a talent factory. Talent alone, they're a top 25 team. There's no question that they're a top 25 team on talent. But will they win 8 games? If they win 8 games, they'll finish in the top 25. I don't think they'll be New Year's Six. I don't think they'll be CFP because they haven't proved that they're going to do it, or that, even though they have the talent to do so, they just haven't proven it. They could be a top 25 team though, but they just struggled to win games that they should win, like the App States and some of these other games that they've played. But then they can beat LSU out of nowhere. So where do you see A&M in 2023, Austin?
So for me, like you said, A&M's very polarizing. Is Jimbo on the hot seat? Is he gonna make it? Is he not? Texas A&M, obviously they have high expectations. They expect Jimbo to make a CFP. But for me personally, I agree with you. I think they're a bowl team, borderline top 25 for me personally. But you could also see a world where they also don't make a bowl, period. It's very interesting. For me right now, I would slide them into bowl team for sure. But all depending on, how they do, can their talent stay out of trouble? Can they stay healthy? You can make an argument for all three, but I'm on right now for bowl team. How about you, Jeffrey?
Yeah, A&M, I mean, like you said, talent, they shouldn't even be in question that they're going to make a bowl. Like, some of the teams that are in bowls, and granted, some of it's the conferences that they're in, the talent is way worse than Texas A&M. Texas A&M has a top 10 to 15 talented team every year, and yet they don't perform like that. And that's why the fan base is so frustrated. They've got a great home environment. Kyle Field is one of the top environments, especially at night, college football. Brock says, I think A&M upsets Tennessee early this year. They should be better this year. Very talented team. It's all about can they put it together. 100%. All about whether the talent that they have and the fact that it's always new players every year. There's always new transfers. There's always players leaving the program. There's always these new freshmen that are talented. It's never consistent. Like, I feel like even though Kellen Mond wasn't, a top-tier quarterback in a lot of people's minds, in college football, when A&M had Kellen Mond, there was stability, at least, at the quarterback position. And he was solid enough, and he got the job done. A&M never got to the top. They never got to the CFP, but they had good seasons. The problem now is that A&M doesn't have stability. They're always losing quarterbacks to the portal. It's always new players at skill positions. It's not consistent. They can't keep consistent players anymore, and that's, to me, what's holding them back. Brock says A&M 8-4 ceiling for me, and that's the problem, because if A&M wins 8 games, they're top 25. They're going to be top. If they go 8-4, they'll be like probably 19th, because it's like, oh, it's A&M and they're 8-4. It's the SEC and all that. But if they go 7-5, 6-6, obviously they won't be ranked, and I can see it because A&M just isn't consistent. They beat and hang with like, I could see Alabama losing to A&M, but A&M going 6-6. That's just how it works. I mean, A&M was 5-7 last year, and they were within a 2-point conversion of beating Alabama in Tuscaloosa. So that's A&M in a nutshell. That's what they do. They hang with Bama. They beat LSU, but then they lose to App State. They lose to South Carolina. It's all that. So I don't really know. I could go either way. I mean, I want to put them in the top 25 because that's where they should be. The talent, I mean, based on talent, they probably should be New Year's 6, but they're not going to be probably because of their inconsistencies. I could go either way. I'll probably, just because of how inconsistent they are, probably put them in bowl team just to be safe. But they should be top 25. They definitely should be top 25. Up next, we have Texas Tech. And Texas Tech's a team that I've actually been seeing a lot of hype for. I think they're like the first team that's not ranked. I think they're like the 2016. They're in the other team votes, the top team. And the Big 12, as we've talked about, we've got, 3 teams in the top 25. You've got Kansas State, you've got Oklahoma, you've got Texas. We put TCU in bold. We didn't put TCU in the top 25. It's Texas Tech, our 4th representative of the top 25 from the Big 12. I can see it going either way. They have a lot of talent. I can see it. But Texas Tech usually is a 7-5, 6-6 team as well. What are your thoughts on Texas Tech?
So Texas Tech is really interesting because, like you said, there's a lot of hype. They're building around them. Some people even made a crazy prediction that Texas Tech is a borderline college football playoff team. And for me, if Texas Tech can stay healthy, Lubbock's a hard place to go and win, whether it's basketball or football. Especially in basketball, that's a tough place to play. But football, it's gotten better. I can like they're hard because of so many good to great teams in the Big 12 possibly. I just don't know where they fit. Obviously, I think they're going to be a bowl team, but do we want to upgrade them to possibly uh, a New Year's Six contender? Do we want to upgrade them to possible natty? Can see a P contender if they happen to get on a miracle run. I mean, I know see a P contender might be a little much for now, but it could go either way. It can go either way for me. How about you, Jeffrey?
Yeah, to me, I feel like 4 teams from the Big 12 are going to be ranked. And that's why I've said it. I've stressed it, talking about it. So we didn't put TCU in the top 25. I feel like Texas Tech can go 8-4. I mean, again, there's a lot of hype, and it's tough when you're trying to bind the hype, but Texas Tech usually doesn't have hype. And, they've gotten some transfers. Like, there's some talent there, and they weren't bad last year. Like Brock says, he's not buying, New Year's Six or anything like that, but Texas Tech did beat Texas last year. They had moments, and they could be better. But like you said, Austin, the thing that makes it difficult is because it's like the Pac-12. You have all these teams that are similar. They're probably going to beat each other up. And that feels like that could be the case with the Big 12 as well. If Tech goes 8-4, I think they're ranked, especially because they're almost ranked now. That I feel like if they lose 4 games, the AP poll probably put them at like 25th. If they go 7-5, they're not. It's close. It's like I could put them here and feel okay with it, and I could put them here and not think it's crazy. I guess since we put TCU in bowl, we'll put Texas Tech in top 25. But these two are interchangeable. I can see TCU or Texas Tech finishing in the top 25. It's going to be close. It's going to be very, very close, but I think Tech could go 8-4. Up next, we have UCLA. Yeah, they're interchangeable. They're so close. It's like one or the other. Up next, we got UCLA, and I mean, DTR's gone. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, he was turnover prone, but he was very successful for UCLA at big games. And UCLA was pretty good last year. Well, he's gone. They got Dante Moore, top recruit, decommitted from Oregon. He's a freshman. Will he be the starting quarterback? Probably. Who knows? But UCLA, I mean, they've got talent, but the thing is you've got that top tier in the pack. You've got USC in the last year of the pack. You've got USC, Oregon, Oregon State, if people believe Oregon State's in that top tier, Washington, and Utah. And then you've got UCLA. They're like that 6th team. They're good, and they could finish in the top 25, but do you really think that 6 teams are going to finish in the top 25 from the pack? That's going to be hard. I don't think it's impossible. If all those teams go 8-4 and up, it could happen. I think UCLA could go 8-4 and they'd finish in the top 25, but that's the problem. If that's the case, all those teams are beating up on each other, and you're not going to have a CFP contender from the pack. So I was hesitant to put USC in the CFP contender. But UCLA could go 8-4. I think they could do it. But do you think that they will, or do you think there's so many good teams that will fall short and beat the bowl team?
Now, the interesting thing with UCLA, Jeffrey, is Chip Kelly surprises people sometimes. Everyone seems to forget they beat Washington last year. Yes. And Washington was one of the hot teams coming down the street last year. And that's what makes UCLA so difficult to predict, because if they happen to go, say, 9-3, they could possibly make a decent bowl or maybe slide into a New Year's Six if things happen to fall their way. It's very interesting, but I would say they're a bowl team, rock solid for now. I could see a world where maybe they slide in the top 25, maybe, just depending on how things go and if how much the Pac-12 ends up beating up on each other. What's your take on it?
That's the key. I mean, if they can go 8-4, I think they can get it done. But they're going to have to beat somebody. Like you said, like they beat Washington last year. If they can beat, someone like that, Oregon, Washington, something like that, team of that caliber, and then win all the other games. Beat your, Washington State's, your Arizona's, all those teams. You win all those against all those teams. I think they could do it. It's close. As I'm sure, no spoiler, I'm sure, Utah and Washington we're going to be higher on. Again, I think 6 teams could be ranked from the pack because of how competitive it is, but I think I'll just go bold team. I think they'll go 7-5 at least. They could go 8-4 and they could finish in the top 25, but it's going to be very close. They're definitely. Again, these aren't really in order, but definitely UCLA is like top of the bowl team. They're very close to being a top 25 team.
Close. UCLA is like one of them.
So up next, we've got Utah, and definitely we're higher on Utah. Cam Rising, I've heard a lot of stuff about Cam Rising. Is he healthy? Is he going to be able to play? I have no idea because I've said it before, and then some people are like, oh, it's not legit. He's fine, all that. But then I've seen other people say it's legitimately a concern. If Cam Rising is not healthy or he can't play for a significant part of the season, Utah's in bad shape. And they could be, that could slide UCLA up into the top 25, and Utah could fall back to bowl team. And plus, they've got a bad schedule. You look at all the Pac-12 schedules, it seems like Utah's is the hardest. It just seems like that. Yeah. I don't know if it is the hardest. Like if you have like a FPI predictor where it showed the toughest Pac-12 schedule and what team it is, but it seems like Utah is the toughest one. As long as Cam Rising's healthy, they're a top 25 team for sure in my book. But what are your thoughts on Utah?
Jeffrey, I'd like to know, what did Utah do to the NCAA committee to deserve all this scheduling that they're getting? I would really like to know. Florida, Baylor, then they got UCLA, USC, Oregon, Washington. My gosh, and Oregon State's there.
Yeah.
It's a murderous row. I'm just, that alone gives me caution. Because me thinking, okay, Colorado, obviously rivalry week, you never know what can happen. But, the other games are all toss-ups, each one. I think, honestly, you can make an argument if they somehow survive that schedule, you could put them over USC, Oregon, and Washington and make them a CFP contender. But those are all ifs. This is basing on what we think will happen. And more than likely, they're going to go into 9-3. I would say, could we possibly slide them in a spot of New Year's 6? If Rising stays healthy and they can win some big games.
The schedule gives Utah the opportunity to get massive wins, and like in basketball, you get big wins, you get all those quad 1 wins. That helps your resume. It helps boost your stock in for like a seed in the tournament. So playing a tough schedule helps you out. The problem with football, it's all about getting wins. And that's why you're seeing more and more of these marquee non-conference games going away, because these teams don't want to play these games because it hurts you. Like in Utah's instance, if they had just an easy non-conference schedule, 3 easy opponents, and then they had the Pac, it would automatically make it easier for them. But no, they've got Florida, they've got Baylor, 2 teams they do not have to play, and 2 teams that even if they win those 2 games, it's not going to suddenly boost Utah's chances of making the CFP, because if they drop 2 Pac-12 games, they're done. They're not going to make the CFP. But then if they drop one of those non-conference games, all they have to do is lose one of those Pac-12 games and they're already eliminated. That's what makes it just awful. The college football is constructed. That's why you have the 12-team playoff. It's going to help you be able to lose more games, but then are you even worthy of making it? That's a whole other discussion. But Utah's schedule is insane. I think they'll go 8-4 at least. If they didn't have the schedule they had, I'd say New Year's 6, but I just do not see them going better than 9-3. That is ridiculously insane. That they could go 6-6. There's a world where they could lose every one of those games, all of them. Florida's kind of a stretch. It's at home. It's the Rice Eccles. It's Florida's first game. They probably win that one, but those other games, are just hard. I just think that Utah, and plus, like you said, Brock said, Utah's Dalton Kincaid. That's tough. I mean, they don't have Britton Covey from a couple years ago. He was a really good player, that very underrated. I'll go top 25 for Utah, but I feel like they can't do better than that. And ironically, because you talk about top 25, we got 6, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We got 22 teams in the top 25, which is interesting because there's top 25 teams. So out of this rest, we'll have a few more, I think, out of this, possibly, maybe. But yeah, we've got around 25 teams. That's crazy. So definitely our next team on the list is not going to be in the top 25 at all. But their team is getting better. I mean, they've legitimately improved. They're not James Franklin Vanderbilt, but they've gotten better. I think that if they can maybe build on what they did last year, those 2 upsets against, Florida and Kentucky, maybe they can do something. Maybe they can get to 6 wins. But that loss to Tennessee, though, just shows you still how far away Vanderbilt is. Where do you think Vanderbilt slides into this tier list in 2023?
Yeah, Jeffrey, you have to remember, we have to put this in context now. They're the greatest 5-7 team to ever lace them up now.
A&M.
Yeah, side joke with A&M Vandy, who's the greatest 5-7? Obviously, it would be A&M, but yeah, just a little side quest. I could see a world where Vandy can make a bowl, but I could also see a world where you could put them in almost bowl, and there's even a world where you could say they're still a dumpster fire. They still got some things to work on. I mean, for me, I would say almost bowl. Be nice to them. But Stanford is getting lonely down there. They do need a friend.
Yeah, I mean, Brock said Utah 8-4, 9-3. Just don't think they'll be good as last year. Yeah, that's part of it, Brock, for sure. It's losing some talent, but that schedule as well. And then Brock says Vandy 5-7, 6-6. I mean, the thing about Vanderbilt is that you look at teams like Auburn and you look at teams like A&M that are borderline bowl teams that you could see them not making a bowl, but the talent is there. That's not the problem, especially in A&M instance. The talent's there. Vanderbilt does not have as much talent by far as the other teams in the SEC. They're a high academic institution. It's hard to get recruits. They get more success in baseball. They just don't have as much in basketball and football. I mean, I know they got I think they got their quarterback back. They got a lot of their players back. I don't know if it's going to result in more wins. And I mean, I'm not saying that the Florida and Kentucky wins were fluky, but Florida and Kentucky could be better this year. And if Florida and Kentucky are better this year, Vanderbilt's probably not beating them again. That's the thing. So it's going to be hard for Vanderbilt to do that. I'll be nice for Vandy, not put them in dumpster fire, because I think they are better than where they were a couple years ago. I think Clark Lee is doing some things. I'll put them in almost bowl team, but I don't think – I think it's going to be very hard for them to get to a bowl game. It's going to be very, very hard.
Yeah, to be nice to them. Now, this next one here, I don't think we have to be nice because go for it, Jeffrey.
I don't even know what's happened to Virginia, because a few years ago, I mean, the Coastal was insane. Every year a new team was winning the Coastal, which was fun. It was very fun to watch. North Carolina wins the Coastal. Virginia Tech wins the Coastal. Pitt wins the Coastal. Virginia wins the Coastal. All these teams were winning the Coastal every year. It was a new team every single year. All 7 teams won it. Even Georgia Tech early on, they won it. Virginia, though, is not the same team anymore. And what's wild is that Brennan Armstrong had one of the best statistical seasons of any quarterback a couple years ago in college football. And then the next year, it collapsed. Stats were down. Virginia was down. And it's not getting better. And Tony Elliott, who a lot of people had question marks when he was at Clemson at offensive coordinator, he's their coach. Like I said, he becomes a coach. All the stats went down, and Virginia got worse. And they're in the ACC, where it's fairly easy to win. Virginia should not be this bad, especially considering, where they were a few years ago. And it's basically the exact same for Virginia Tech as well. Virginia Tech was good years ago. I mean, when they had Frank Beamer. They were solid. They never elite. They were really, really good. And then Justin Fuentes was solid at first, but it just kept getting worse. They fired him. Now Virginia Tech's back. But we're going to get to them. But Virginia's just not what they were a few years ago. I don't know why they're not, and I think that they could get better soon. But Brock says dumpster fire. I mean, I could see them going 5-7 because they're in the ACC. I could see it. But the way that they played last year at times, and they lost to Old Dominion as well, I think Virginia can go in dumpster fire. I think it's possible that they could be almost bolting. What are your thoughts? If you think they should be higher, I can move them up. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I say dumpster fire too. Not much on them, but like you said, Virginia used to be a team that was contending to win the Coastal every year, and it was like, holy moly, what is wrong with you? Like almost like you see a pretty girl and you're like, hey girl, what's going on? And then it's like, oh gosh, well, what happened to you, girl? Did those bikers come beat you up because you owed them money? That's Virginia in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean it's a crazy analogy, but not 100% wrong. I mean it's about the same. It's sad to see Virginia's fall, but it is what it is. I mean, it just, to me, they're not really gonna improve as of right now. Anyway, it's gonna take some time for them to get a little bit better. Whether Tony Elliott does it or not is to be determined. Virginia Tech's up next, and it's even more crazy because, to me, Virginia never reached Virginia Tech's heights. There was a time where Virginia Tech was dominating Virginia in the rivalry because Virginia Tech was that team. They were that solid program out of the ACC. They were not elite like what Clemson became. They were not elite like what Florida State, Miami were in the past. But Virginia Tech was just solid. They were 8-4, 9-3, even some 10-2s under Frank Beamer. If Fuentes was taking them to 8-4 at first, and it got worse. Like I said, now they're bad. And you see the ACC, and you've got Boston College, you've got Georgia Tech, and you've got Virginia and dumpster fire.
Boy.
And it's like, are we going to put a fourth ACC team in dumpster fire? There are really 4 ACC teams that are dumpster fire because you look at the other conferences and there's not as many teams represented. Big Ten's got 2. Pac-12 is 2. It's not as many. But like I said, Virginia Tech has been awful lately, and it doesn't seem like it's getting any better either. What are your thoughts on Virginia Tech?
I'll say, Jeffrey, this doesn't help the ACC out much. I mean, in terms
Helps
of
Louisville though, because they play them.
Yeah, but it doesn't help the conversation of who's the best conference. If you say, "Oh, the ACC's right there," not according to our tier list because they've got too many dumpster fires to fix. But I mean, do we want to be kind and say maybe they can almost make a bowl, or should we just back the dumpster truck up to them and throw them in?
Yeah, Brock says dumpster fire trash. I'm sorry. I mean, I have to agree. Again, they're just a team that is far from their glory days. Maybe they can get back there, but it just seems as of right now where Virginia and Virginia Tech are at, they're just not getting significantly better. So I have to put them there.
Although I will say, before we move on, I think the dumpster fire is finished, though. I don't think we'll see any more.
I mean, there's one team that I'm sure is going to be debatable that they deserve to be a dumpster fire, but I don't think they're dumpster fire, and we'll explain why. But up next, we've got Washington State. This is a team that has potential to be better than they are because you saw what Mike Leach, again, rest in peace to Mike Leach, what he was able to do with Wazoo. They were having success, significance. They were even ranked some, especially when the Gardner Minshew. And they've had success in the past. They're not like Washington where they've had like great moments, but like Washington State can win. They're not a program that's just incapable of winning. And lately they've been, not bad. They made a bowl game last year, even though they lost because they had a lot of opt-outs. Fresno State with Jake Hayner took care of them. But they made a bowl game last year. And they got a lot of guys back. So what are your thoughts on Washington State?
I would like to bring up, too, they beat Wisconsin last year. And a lot of people are thinking this year, since they're coming to the Cougs town, which we'll get to them here in just a minute, but this could be another big Washington victory. I don't think Washington's a dumpster fire. They're far from it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could make an argument that they're a bowl team again.
Yeah.
I think argument for a bowl team, top 25, let's not push it. Unless they drastically improve beyond what we think, which there's always those few teams, let's be honest, no matter what you watch, NBA, NFL, baseball, hockey, whatever you love, college football, there are always a few teams where you say, they're good, but they're not this. And then you're like, holy moly, holy Hannah Batman, they're in the championship game. I did not see this coming. But for Washington State, I would say we can throw them in bowl comfortably. I think they can get 6 wins, especially with their non-con.
Yeah, Brock says it as well, bowl eligible, and I agree. I mean, if we didn't put UCLA in top 25, it's hard to see Washington State doing it. I mean, it's not impossible. Like if someone told me Washington State's going to finish top 25, I would say again, it's not impossible. It's not crazy. But the likelihood of it, and basically what we've done with the entire tier list, is that we go with the most likeliest tier option, not the high ceiling or the floor. I think Washington State, it's a solid 6-6. That they could do better. I could see somehow where they go 5-7 and don't make a bowl, but odds are they'll more than likely make a bowl game probably at the end of the day. Probably about a repeat season of last year. We got Wake Forest up next. And this is a team that Wake Forest is a team that always does better than the expectations. Dave Clawson is a coach that has just been able to, despite the recruiting limitations of Wake Forest, he's gotten enough quality players in where they win. And Sam Hartman was great for them for years. He was a bit turnover prone. He had some games where he threw a lot of picks. I remember one bowl game where he threw like 5 picks or whatever and they lost. But he had some good games too. And that's why Wake Forest was, a team that was talked about, a relevant team because of his success. And their style of offense where they kind of hold the ball, where they have the running back and he kind of sits there for like 2 seconds and then they run it. It's like a delayed counter option run thing. It's a very interesting style of offense, but that's what Wake does, and a lot of people think it's interesting. But Sam Hartman's gone to Notre Dame, and that hurts. A.T. Perry's gone at wideout. I don't know. I mean, I have a hard time because it's like when you believe in a coach and just believe in what he's done with the program and has so much success, it's hard to see Wake falling off to a point where they're not going to make a bowl. Especially because we have a lot of ACC teams that are in, the bottom, tiers where you feel like Wake's not going to fall to 5-7, but without Hartman, that hurts. And I just, to me, I don't know if they're going to be able to be a top 25 team. Brock just said it right here. He says top 25 team. It's possible, but without Hartman, it's gonna be hard. So what do you think on Wake?
So the thing is we have to take into account our tier list. There's a lot of bottom feeders in the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
You would more than likely think that they're going to be a bowl team. I mean, because as we look at our tier list and for the upcoming teams, it's kind of like you look at the lay of the landscape. Obviously, they're not anywhere near the college football New Year's Six. No. They're not anywhere near that. But top 25, like Brock said, if they could get some big wins, maybe if they surprise maybe a Clemson or maybe they surprise a team or two that not expected to win that game, maybe the committee will be like, oh, they went 8-4 and they beat this team. Let's give them a little respect. Let's put them at like 24. But you can also see a world where they're just a bowl team. I think it's top 25 or bowl. I don't think they're anything below that. I don't think 5-7. I think like Dave Clawson, you believe in what he does. And I think top 25 bowl. I'll let you decide on this one.
Yeah, I want to put him in top 25 because I don't think that we have a lot of ACC teams in the top 25 to go up. You've got Carolina, you've got Florida State, and that's about it. And obviously we've got Clemson at the top, but that's it. I mean, we're basically out of ACC teams except Louisville. It's going to be interesting where we put them. But, I mean, it's not impossible because, I mean, usually you have around 3 or 4 teams per conference, but, making the top 25. But I'm going to have to probably go with bowl team for Wake. I just feel like Hartman and A.T. Perry were such it was like the vast majority of their offense. They don't have a massive run game. They do have a decent run game, but a lot of that was just quarterback run with Hartman himself. And I just think a lot of their offense is going to be gone. And they got some players into the portal, but it's just not a lot because it is Wake Forest. It's tough to get players in. I think they're going to take a bit of a step back, and then I think Dave Clawson's going to figure it out, maybe bump them back up again, possibly to a top 25 team. I think this year's going to be a little bit tougher for them, but I think we'll make a bowl. Brock says, I do think Wake takes slice it back. We're a bowl team. Argument top 25. Yeah, it's close. But yeah, I would go bowl team.
One of those interchangeables. You can make the argument top 25 bowl. There's a lot of teams that we've gone back and forth on.
We're down to our last 5 teams to talk about. We've been live for over 3 hours, so we've had a lot of thoughts on a lot of teams. But up next, we've got the last Pac-12 team in the last season of the Pac-12's existence as we currently know it. Washington. Michael Penix, Kalen DeBoer, Roma Dunze. Those 3 names are why Washington is what they are right now. Because Kalen DeBoer, offensive coordinator in Indiana, he goes over Fresno State as head coach, does well there, and he's the Washington head coach. He gets Penix to follow because Penix was at Indiana when he was the offensive coordinator. Now he's the quarterback of Washington, and he's lighting it up. He's healthy now because he's not getting beat up like he was at IU with a poor offensive line. He's having a lot more success at Washington. Roma Dunze is a fantastic receiver. They've got other receivers as well that are really solid, but Roma Dunze is the best one. Their defense is good. I would say Washington's defense isn't as good as it was, a few years ago when they had Peterson as head coach. It's not as good, but it's still good. But Washington's a team that I've seen people say New Year's Six. They could do that. But like you mentioned earlier, Austin, they did lose to UCLA last year, and that's what kept them out of a New Year's Six. They didn't make it. They played Texas in, I think, the Alamo Bowl. They beat them, which that's a good bowl game and not New Year's Six. Washington can make a New Year's Six. There's only so many spots for it, and we already got Oregon and USC. I mean, again, contenders, so you don't have to make it to be a contender. But what are your thoughts on Washington? You think they're top 25 team, or you think they're a New Year's Six?
Is there a crazy argument where we could put them in CFP contender? Is that a crazy argument? Because last year 10-2. Let's be honest. What if the roles were reversed? What if they played USC in the championship game of the Pac-12 and won that? Would they have possibly gotten that berth in the CFP? Now, that loss to UCLA didn't help necessarily. That's probably what drug them down a lot. But they were a game away from making the Pac-12 title game. Could we see a world where they make the CFP? I mean, honestly, I don't want to put Washington any lower than New Year's Six. I feel like I know we have Oregon and USC, but I think New Year's Six. I'm conflicted on this one. What do you think, Jeffrey? Am I being too nice to Washington?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because the chemistry of Kalen DeBoer, Michael Penix, when it's at its best, is off the charts. And like Brock said, Penix had Heisman stats last year. He says he thinks top 25. I don't see it, but I think they're a top 25 team. I mean, they're going to be a top 25 team. Unless, Penix gets injured or something, they're going to be a top 25 team. And if he puts up the stats he had last year, there is a possibility of New Year's Six. They were this close last time. And if tiebreakers happen to go their way this time, unlike last year, they could get in, a New Year's Six game if like USC makes the playoff. It's close. And like we said, we have, the teams already, the 2 teams in the New Year's Six, but I actually would have to say I think Washington can be there. All these teams aren't going to be there, but I think it's close for Washington. I think that they're definitely a top 25 team, but I think you can make an argument for New Year's Six, especially if Penix puts up the same stats and things break their way this time around, unlike last time. It's possible, very possible.
Now on to a team that definitely will not be a New Year's Six contender. Spoiler alert.
Big 12 team that needs wins. I mean, Neil Brown, you talk about coaches on the hot seat, Jeff Hafley at Boston College, Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri, Tom Allen in Indiana. There's a lot of coaches on the hot seat. But Neil Brown at West Virginia, I thought there was a shot he was going to get fired last year. I know he hasn't been at West Virginia for too terribly long, but West Virginia is a program that just not too long ago, I remember, was consistently 7-5. Like they never were, a top Big 12 team, but they were good. They were a team like you play in Country Road, you play in Morgantown, and it's tough. It's always tough. The crowd's loud and proud. It's good stuff. It's like a pit. It's like they're like Pittsburgh. They're just a tough team to play on their field. Crazy things happen in West Virginia. But lately, West Virginia's not intimidating. Like every now and then they'll play a tough home game, but they're just not intimidating like they were. Their offense is mad. Neil Brown was not able to fix JT Daniels, game at this past season. Now he's at Rice. It just didn't work out with him. I don't know. I think that overall, and Jared Dagey the year before that couldn't have success either. I just think overall that West Virginia, I mean, they're not talent-wise a dumpster fire, despite the fact that they're way less talented than they were a few years ago. They've fallen off in talent, but they're not a dumpster fire in talent. But Brock's is dumpster because of the way they've been performing. I mean, if they go 4-8, I mean, you can consider that for dumpster fire. And we don't have a Big 12 team in dumpster fire, I don't think. No, Iowa State. Iowa State's a dumpster. They're the only Big 12 team. There's one Big 12 team. So that would be two, and we've got two from basically every conference. Except the SEC, I think we'll have one. I don't know. It's close. I mean, for me, it's either almost bowl team or dumpster fire. What are your thoughts on West Virginia?
So for me, this comes down to, okay, we have one Big 12 team. Other than that, you can make the argument that they're one of the best conferences going right now, just off our tier list. I'm going to say almost bowl team. Almost. I'm going to say that they'll eke out 5 wins. They'll win some games that they shouldn't. They'll beat some teams that they shouldn't. Like, it would not surprise me if they somehow shock the world and beat Penn State. It'd be like, because that's the West Virginia thing to do. And that would be, and then the next week they lose to Duquesne. And it'd be like, that's just the West Virginia thing to do, is it not?
It is. I mean, they're very up and down. They're kind of like Miami sometimes, or A&M, where they can beat teams they shouldn't and then lose teams that, that they should beat. I mean, they should have beat Pitt last year. West Virginia should have beat Pitt last year. They fell apart. I mean, it's like Brock said. He originally said dumpster, now he says bowl maybe. I mean, what's between that? What's between dumpster? What's between bowl maybe? Almost bowl teams. I'm kind of with you. I mean, the talent is not a dumpster fire. That's all I'm saying. The way that the coaching, the way everything's been going for West Virginia, it's a dumpster fire compared to where they used to be. But there's enough talent that they'll probably win at least 4 or 5 games, and I don't know if that'll be enough to save Neil Brown's job, but they should be better. West Virginia should not be down here. They should be higher because they are a program that is capable of way more. But I would agree with you. I think they'll be better than dumpster fire based on their talent. Wisconsin's up next, and they're a team that has a bright future because you've got Luke Fickell, who was at Cincinnati, took him to the playoffs, and a lot of people obviously are very high on Luke Fickell. Wisconsin, the Paul Chryst era, it was solid, but it wasn't as good as Barry Alvarez and Brett Bielema's eras. They did better. Paul Chryst, it was really good at first, but it was starting to decline. They fired him a lot sooner than probably a lot of people thought. But if Wisconsin doesn't want to decline, especially in this environment of the Big Ten, changing with these new teams being added, Wisconsin wants to stay at the top of their game. So they got rid of Chris, they bring in Fickle, and there's a lot of moves. They've got Tanner Mordecai, quarterback from SMU. They've got a lot of new faces. Braylon Allen's back at running back. He's talented. Wisconsin, they're in the West. It makes it easier. What are your thoughts on Wisconsin, Luke Fickell's first year as head coach?
So I've seen a lot of predictions for them. There's some people that are saying, "Oh, Wisconsin is a bona fide New Year's Six team," and then I've seen some that have kind of been like, top 25, maybe bowl. I think for me, since there's been a lot of movement, a lot of new players, new faces, I think Wisconsin is top 25. I don't think they're New Year's Six just yet. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. Although we don't got any Big Ten teams in the New Year's Six yet. So, and I don't, no offense to nobody, Indiana fans, especially to the guy up to my top, but I don't think the next one's going to be one. So do we want to maybe put Wisconsin in that category?
I mean, Wisconsin would have to go 10-2 to make a New Year's Six game. And I mean, Grand West, and that's going to make it easier. But, for them to be able to get to, what they need to, the games they need to win to make a New Year's Six game. But still, it's his first year. I mean, we put Nebraska and, Colorado and Purdue, 3 teams with first-year head coaches and almost bowl teams. And, if we put Wisconsin in Year 6, that would be bucking the trend for sure. I mean, they're in the West. They brought in a lot of talent, and it's Luke Fickell. That's the perk. That's what makes it seem possible. Brock says Luke will turn Wisconsin around. He's a good coach. But how soon will he turn around? Will he immediately turn it around now and they're already great, or will it take some years? He says bowl eligible possible. I think they'll make a bowl game. If they were in the East, you could make an argument there being too many tough games. They maybe wouldn't, but they're in the West. Their schedule's not extremely difficult. If they beat Washington State, they're going to make a bowl. If they lose Washington State, things get slightly dicey, but they should make a bowl game. I mean, I would argue they're either top 25, squeak that, like squeaking in like Iowa at 8-4, or they're just a bowl team. I don't think New Year's Six. I mean, it's just hard to envision Wisconsin being better than that. I think they can go 8-4 and maybe be top 25. What do you think? You think they're top 25, or you think they're bowl? For me, those are the 2 tiers I'm seeing.
So if we look at our tier list, when you scroll up, how many teams do we currently have? 23?
So we got in the top 25, we've got 6, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 teams. 24. So we need one more. So you've got this entire bowl teams tier, and then you've got Wisconsin. And to be fair though, we didn't do the non-Power 5. There's usually one non-Power 5 team that's ranked as well, like a Tulane or something like that, or maybe Boise State, something like that. So that's interesting. And plus, also because this tier list was not updated before the teams went to the Big 12, we didn't do Cincinnati, we didn't do BYU, we didn't do UCF, Houston. They went to the Big 12. So one of those teams could be ranked top 25, or it could be Wisconsin. For the sake of this tier list, since we don't have these teams, we can just put Wisconsin in the top 25 if we want to have 25 teams in the top 25 since we don't have those teams included. I mean, of the teams that we have in bowl teams, I could see UCLA or TCU, or maybe like Baylor or something possibly moving up, or even A&M if they actually perform with their talent. But I mean, we can put Wisconsin in top 25 for the sake of, so we'll have 25 teams. I mean, they can go 8-4 in Luke Fickell's first year. It's going to be tough because this is his first year, but they don't have too hard of a schedule, and he is a really good coach, and they're in the West, so it's not impossible. So now we're on to our last 2 teams, Indiana and Louisville. Indiana's a team that had the magical run in 2019 and 2020. Went 8-5. They went 6-2 in 2020. Didn't win their bowl game either time because Penix was injured, but they had good seasons. And for Indiana, those were great seasons. And then, Penix got hurt in 2021 again, and they went 2-10. It was awful in 2021. And then in 2022, they went 4-8. And there was some improvement. They beat Michigan State, they beat Illinois. But now you got a young quarterback competition with Brennan Sorsby and Taven Jackson. I think Taven Jackson won the job because Trace Jackson Davis' younger brother. I don't think he transfers to Indiana to not start from Tennessee. They've got Jalen Lucas, who could be a really solid player. They've got some decent players all around, but they got a top 25 transfer class. That's the problem, is transfers. How will those transfers gel? I think Indiana could make a bowl. I think they could go 6-6, but the schedule's hard as always. Their schedule's going to be easier next year because you're not going to have the Big Ten East and West the way it is. All the teams are going to be playing fairly equal schedules, so Indiana's going to have an easier schedule. Indiana's schedule's hard. I can see them making a bowl, but what do you think on Indiana in 2023?
This is an interesting one. As we get down to our two teams, I think Indiana, I know some people may say throw them in the dumpster, back up the dumpster, that hope is all lost. But I honestly think people should have a little more faith. I think Indiana, like you said, is borderline almost bowl team. Mm-hmm. Their schedule, they play Michigan and Ohio State this year. Those are two obvious losses. Could they sneak out a win maybe over a Maryland? Could they beat Michigan State for the old brass platoon 2 years in a row? Can they beat Purdue? They got some very manageable games. I'm going to say they're going to be almost bowl eligible for me. Mm-hmm. But that is depending on, who knows, maybe crazy things happen and they upset Michigan or Ohio State. Who knows? I doubt it happens, but who maybe they catch Ohio State in week 1 and beat them 42.
Yeah, no, if they beat Ohio State in week 1, that would break the college football, world, the fans, the media, everything. It would just be insane. That would be like one of the biggest upsets in a long time, especially for a Power 5 team beating a Power 5 team. You talk about like the, Michigan losing to App State, A&M losing to App State kind of thing. I mean, Indiana hasn't beat Ohio State since like 1988, so it would be insane if they did. But Brock says bowl. And for me, I've already made a video on Indiana. I made it probably about a month ago, and I said Indiana was going to go 5-7, which 5-7 is the definition of almost bowl team. And then Brock says not happening, laughing aloud. So, okay, I guess he's not saying they're going to a bowl. But the thing is that they have enough talent, I think, to do it. The O-line might be better because of Bob Bostad. The offensive line coach is coming over from Wisconsin. And they got a lot of transfers. It's whether they mesh. The young quarterbacks, though, you wish they had more experience, but they're just young. I think Taven Jackson could be really solid. He was a former 4-star recruit. But, again, he's going to be going through a gauntlet off the bat with Ohio State. They've got manageable games against Purdue. They've got Rutgers, Michigan State, Louisville, Akron, Indiana State. There's enough wins there for them to get to 6. But realistically, I just see 5-7. That's what I predicted in my video. I got 5-7. I think that it's going to be enough to save Tom Allen's job. I don't think he's going to get fired for a 5-7 season. And they could go 6-6. All these teams and almost bowl teams theoretically can go 6-6, especially like Mississippi State. Mississippi State's like the one where, they can go 6-6. Nebraska probably could. Indiana could. Purdue probably could. That's why they're almost there. They could. But realistically, I think 5-7 and for Indiana, makes sense, especially with their schedule and the young quarterback situation.
Like you said, manageable wins.
And on to the last team, we've got Louisville, Austin's favorite team. The Louisville Cardinals. The good thing for them is, while Indiana's a hard schedule. Oh, he says not happening. No, I was saying Indiana will not beat Ohio State. Okay, well, yeah, definitely not happening, 100%. It would take crazy, just fluky week 1 game to happen, but it definitely more likely for sure. But Brock, at least he thinks Indiana might make a bowl. Very close. I'm like that close to saying they'll go 6-6, but 5-7 I think is probably more likely, but it's close. But on to Austin's favorite team, the Louisville Cardinals. The good thing for Louisville is they got an easier schedule, whereas Indiana has a really tough schedule. That's the difference here. Because like Louisville, I've seen even people saying that Louisville could go 9-3 and be top 25. That's because of the schedule. The ACC schedule, they don't play Clemson, they don't play Florida State, they don't play North Carolina. That's great. But then they have in the non-conference Indiana, Kentucky, Notre Dame. Those are tough. They could lose all three. They could win 2 of the 3, maybe even win all 3 if something crazy happened. A lot of variance for Louisville. The schedule does help, but it's a first-year head coach in Jeff Brom. Jack Plummer's a quarterback that's solid, but he never really had a lot of success at Purdue. There's a lot of question marks there. A lot of new players up and down the roster. What are your thoughts on Louisville for 2023?
So there's some interesting things going into this year. Scott Satterfield's off to Cincinnati, which we did not get to because this was not updated. Updated disclaimer. If this was updated, this might change the dynamic somewhat. But as far as this goes, like you said, the schedule is very manageable. Notre Dame's probably our biggest roadblock. If we could beat Notre Dame, the sky's the ceiling. Could we go 10-2 maybe in a world where the schedule lines up for us? Possibly. But I think we're a solid bowl team. I think we're safely in there. The question is, do we move into top 25 territory? Considering we put Wisconsin there, do we want to switch Wisconsin out for Louisville is the question. Or do we put Louisville there as an honorable mention as like 26? You're almost there.
Yeah, the issue is Brock, he says 8-4. And the issue is that, again, for most teams, that's good enough to be ranked. But since the ACC is so, has a lot of weak teams, and Louisville's going to be racking up wins over these bad teams in the ACC that we have in dumpster fire. The problem is that if Louisville goes 8-4 and they just say they lose to Indiana, just hypothetically, and they lose to Kentucky, they lose to Notre Dame, or even if they don't lose to Indiana, they lose to a couple ACC teams, all of their wins are going to be against teams that aren't that great. So it'd be harder to rank them at 8-4. I think that they'd have to be 9-3 to be ranked. And I think that they could go 9-3, but still it is Jeff Brom's first season. So it's going to be really interesting. I would say bowl team because I think they'll go 7-5 at least. And even at 8-4, I just don't think they'll be ranked. They'll definitely be a bowl team because the schedule is not hard. And I think Jeff Brom has enough talent there to get into a bowl. But, yeah, it's going to be very hard for them to be a top 25 team based on the fact that there's just not enough quality wins for Louisville to rack up where the committee or the AP poll or even playoff committee would rank them, at the back end of the rankings at 8-4. They'd have to be 9-3 probably.
It almost makes that Notre Dame like if we want to be ranked, we have to win that game.
Oh yeah,
it almost makes that game like the most important game of our season. Like I know that's not if we happen to get to Clemson or say Florida State in the title game, that would be theoretically your most important. But if the scenario plays out like you're saying, Notre Dame's going to be the most important game. We beat them. The committee more than likely says, okay, Louisville, you can come have a spot at the table. But if we lose and just rack up all these dumpster wins, then they're going to be like, sorry.
Yeah, it kind of happened to Indiana because they were 8-4 back in 2019 before they lost to Tennessee in the bowl game because Penix was out and they lost by 1 score. But when they were 8-4, they weren't ranked. And they weren't ranked because they had all these wins against the Northwesterns and the Rutgers and all that year. And they were all bad. And like they there was a thing where they were saying that Indiana didn't even beat a team above 500. That could be Louisville. Like Louisville could be this year's rendition of Indiana from that year. Louisville could have all these wins over teams below 500. And if they're 8-4, they're just not going to be ranked. It is what it is. Oh, Anthony Easton's back at 4-19. He says road games at Pitt and NC State at Miami schedule isn't as easy as everyone is making it out to be. Well, that's true, but to your point, Anthony, that's a great point. But I think what hurts, though, is because those teams aren't perceived as good in the medias, at the national media, the ones that are voting on all this stuff. Like at Pitt, like if Pitt's a 6-16 and Louisville wins that game on the road, like that's a good win to you and me in Austin because we're looking at, well, Pitt's tough on the road, but like if Pitt had Kenny Pickett and Louisville beat them, then that would be a good win. Miami, if this was, Miami's Miami, so people might, but yeah, it's just Miami hasn't been good lately. And then, because they lost to Middle Tennessee State last year. No one's really giving too many props for wins over Miami, and then NC State, they don't have Leary anymore. To your point, it's not super easy, but that's why it's going to make it harder for Louisville to get to a top 25 team, because if you lose to Notre Dame, if you lose to Kentucky, you could beat Indiana, but then you lose to Pitt, NC State, Miami on the road, that's 7-5. It's just those aren't easy games, to your point, and that's what's going to make it hard for Louisville to be a top 25 team. Not impossible, but definitely difficult. But definitely, I think that Louisville will be a bowl team.
Overall, though, I think
go ahead.
Pretty good on our list.
Mm-hmm. I think we did a really good job. I mean, to wrap up here, we have in the CFP contenders Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, and then Penn State is the wild card, like last team that we think has a shot to make it. New Year's Six contenders, we have USC, LSU, Oregon, Tennessee, and Washington. And that makes sense because of the fact you usually have 11 teams, and then that last team is like a Tulane that they get in the Cotton Bowl. So that makes sense there. And then top 25 teams, we have Arkansas, Florida State, Iowa, K-State, Texas, Notre Dame, Carolina, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Oregon State, South Carolina, Texas Tech, Utah, Wisconsin. Bowl teams, UCLA, TCU, Louisville, Auburn, Baylor, Duke, Florida, Illinois, Kansas, Kentucky, Maryland, Miami, Minnesota, NC State, Oklahoma State, Pitt, Syracuse, Texas A&M, Washington State, Wake Forest. Almost bowl teams, Arizona, Colorado, Michigan State, Mississippi State, Nebraska, Purdue, Vanderbilt, West Virginia, and Indiana. And then dumpster fires, Rutgers, Arizona State, Boston College, Cal, Georgia Tech, Iowa State, Missouri, Northwestern, Stanford, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. But this was definitely a lot of fun to do. I really enjoyed the tier list. It was a great idea, Austin, that you had to do it. It was a lot of fun. But any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, this should be a great upcoming college football season. Looking forward to what's going to happen. Maybe we get a couple surprisers when people go back and look at this and say, "Oh, Michigan State was on your almost bowl," and they go to a New Year's Six again, and then they can come back and say, "Oh, y'all were not very high on Michigan State. What happened?" Well, that's the whole fun of this tier list, is you're going off what you've seen recently. And that's the case for a lot of teams. Who knows? Utah may go unbeaten and win it all and may prove us all wrong. But it should be a fun season. Looking forward to it. I appreciate you having me on. And hopefully everyone enjoyed this, because this was a lot of fun. And who knows? Maybe more of this in the future.
Brock says, Austin, who is your team buddy? That's why we saved Indiana Louisville for last. Louisville is Austin's favorite team. He's definitely very excited about the Jeff Brom era, hoping that the Cards do well. And again, I appreciate everyone for being in chat. You guys made this an awesome stream as well. Appreciate the super chat from earlier from Tyler Savage Sports. Really do appreciate that. And again, thanks so much everyone for being here. Go check out Sports Talk with Austin as well. Subscribe to his channel because he's starting that. He's doing new videos and live streams over there. Subscribe to Only Talk Sports if you hadn't. Like the stream down below. Comment after the stream. Talk about all kind of stuff. Share the stream out on social media. Really appreciate everyone for being here. But definitely we'll have more content coming out before the college football season. More previews. We're going to have another preview on here with Austin doing a Louisville preview. And I'm going to be doing an Indiana preview over on his channel as well. So definitely look forward for that. But Brock said, roll tide, good night. Good night to you, Brock. It is late at 4:24 a.m. We made it this long, almost 3 hours and 40 minutes, but it was a blast. And again, appreciate you being on, Austin. And thanks everyone for being in chat. Good night, everybody. Cannot wait for the